One, you're on the air.
Would everyone please stand for the pledge?
Good evening, everybody. This is our first meeting back in several months now. I know it's going to be a little bit awkward, but I'm going to ask you to try to use your mask. If you can't speak loud enough, just make sure you're keeping social distance. And I'm sure I'll be reminding you throughout the evening of this, but it's for everybody's well-being. First on the agenda is a resolution for Barone Mariano 32 Overlook Drive, a regrading application.
You have to come up to the microphone here, please. You don't need to say anything.
And there is also a portable mic up there if you need to take it. There's going to be two people up there. The microphone there has been sterilized also. Rich, any comments?
No comments. This is on for resolution. All engineering comments have been addressed.
Pat?
Same thing, Mr. Chairman. You have a resolution of approval before you this evening for the regrading plan.
And Mike had no comments also.
Right.
Correct.
I think if I remember correctly on this, this fill, Rich, was tested and is clean at this point?
Correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, do we have a motion to adopt this regrading resolution?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion for the resolution of the Planning Board of the Town of Carmel, number 20-02, July 15, 2020, for tax map number 65.18-1-4, Barone regrading plan.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
I don't think. No bond. Right.
Next on the agenda is Melcher, Charles, and Stephanie, 417 Seminary Hill Road. It's a site plan for a barn. Mike's memo, since Mike's not here tonight, said all his comments have been answered. He just needs the variances. That's from the zoning board. Rich, any comments from you?
No, I've met with the applicant's representative. All engineering comments have been addressed. They have referred this to the fire department, both Mayapack and Carmel, because we didn't know where it landed. So that's about where we're at. So all comments have been addressed.
Pat, yourself?
And Mr. Chairman, they've also addressed the planning issues. The plans have been revised accordingly. And the next step on this is a referral to the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Let me ask anyone on the board here if they have any questions on this. Mark, Bob, Ray, Anthony?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Does anyone have any questions on this? If not, we would need a motion to deny to the ZBA.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to deny this to the ZBA.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you. Good luck.
Do you sign this right now?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck. That's something. Oh, Joel's part.
Well, we are, right? Denying it.
Yeah, I forget his name.
Yeah, in this case, we're all right. Yeah.
Figure that chair there.
All set. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Good luck. Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Next on the agenda, 728 Route 6 is an LLC amended site plan.
Mr. Chairman, I know they're out in the hallway. So there's the owner now. Willie, you're up.
I know I'm up.
No, you're not. You're standing back there.
Crowd everything. Good evening, everybody.
Mike, how are you? Oh, well, thanks.
Rich, would you mind reading Mike's comments as well as yours, please?
No problem, Mr. Chairman.
Hello, Willie.
Hello, how are you doing?
Right.
Hello.
So this is Mike Carnazza. He has sent an email out. The applicant was issued a permit to change the facade of the building but stay fully within the existing footprint. Stop work order was issued because the construction was extended off the footprint. They are here to legalize the extension and change the use from a restaurant catering hall to a restaurant and 4 other smaller retail spaces. There are no proposed uses for the second floor. Dry storage is only permitted use for the space unless they return to the board. You need to provide a copy of variances granted in 1991. He would like to verify they aren't specific to the previous use. Put all granted variances on the zoning table if it is currently incomplete. Provide the aisle width. It is not clear on my copy. You will need to delineate the parking area that is not on this parcel with physical barrier. If a portion of the parking will be on an adjacent lot, easements must be submitted. That is from Mike regarding this particular site, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Yourself, and your comments, Rich?
Okay. So the application encompasses a proposal to renovate an existing restaurant building to a small retail strip. Per the applicant, the existing parking and utilities will remain unchanged. The following are the preliminary comments. Referrals would be required for the Mahopac Fire Department, New York State DEP, and New York State DOT. Permits would be required probably from New York State DOT, depending on the ingress and egress along Route 6. Putnam County Department of Health for the grease trap approval. New York City DEP for wastewater flows. Depending on the proposed intended use for the site, a traffic study may be warranted. The drawing should show all vehicle movement plans, a vehicle movement plan which shows all turning radii, includes turning radii into and out of the site, what type of vehicle traffic will be entering the site. There's no definition regarding delivery of goods to the site. The applicant will need to show if any work is being performed in the New York State DOT right-of-way. If so, approval would be required from the DOT. The number of employees should be provided so as to calculate the number of required parking spaces and wastewater. Provide calculation for the grease trap sizing. A landscaping plan for the rear and sides of the building should be provided. All plantings should be verified by the wetlands inspector and installed per section 142 of the town code. All curbs and asphalt should meet specs provided in town of Carmel Town Code. Sidewalks, manhole, and guide rails shall be installed per section 128 of the town code. The applicant should provide a separate water and wastewater use report. A legend on the drawing should be provided. All signs, pavement markings should be provided at the ingress, and signs like stop and yield and pavement markings do not enter should be provided at the ingress and egress of the sites. The applicant does not address stormwater from the site. All existing drainage should be provided. Additional details are required for the garbage enclosure. Details for the location and height of exterior lighting, lights along, and lighting and lights along with the spill plan denoting illumination levels should be provided. Design of the retaining wall should be provided, and should any public improvements be deemed necessary as part of the development, a performance bond and associated engineering fee would need to be established. Also, they're saying, I didn't put this in my memo, but if you look at the parking area there are no line stripes, and it has a lot of grass growing through it. So keeping the existing parking is kind of that won't go along with the rest of the way this project should be looking. If you're having a big, beautiful building, which we're all in favor of, the parking area should be also addressed. That is what I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Rich. Pat also had a number of comments. Pat,
Yeah,
please.
so many of my comments, Mr. Chairman, have already been addressed, but let me just sort of summarize things. The renovation of the building is a great thing. That's a very conspicuous location. So improving that building is a great thing. Its appearance, you now know you have the role of the architectural board as well. So the physical appearance of that improvement is something that we want to pay attention to. The use inside the building, you heard a couple of comments about it. Second floor storage is fine. It needs to be reflected on the plan, Willie. There's one space that's identified as a coffee shop, and it's been identified on the plan as a retail use. The detail of that coffee shop needs to be provided because sometimes that becomes a restaurant. That's a different parking requirement. So clarify that for us, Willie. The front of the site is very significant to us, that there's as you know it now, there's a kind of a patio and a deck in front of the building. About half of that sits in the right-of-way. So number one, give us evidence that the DOT is letting you stay out there. And number two, that space needs to be, it's right out there. It needs to be well done. So the fencing's okay, but it needs some special attention to that particular area. There's a space next to it that's sort of just paved area that's sitting out there. If we can reclaim that for some landscaping, that would be great. All the comments about the parking area need to be addressed. Landscaping's important. So the northern property line next to the rink is overgrown. It's kind of messy. So in addition to the front of the site, if we can clean up the sides of the site, that would be a tremendous benefit to all of us. And how that parking lot's going to work, particularly because, as you heard, a portion of that's not on their property. It's either an easement or some license agreement to share that parking. So we have to understand how that's going to work. And again, I don't want to repeat the issues, lighting and so forth. All those other things need to be clarified. And again, I think it's incumbent upon us to push hard on this one, Willie, because it's such a conspicuous property. We've got to really make it look great.
So, Willie, I think you've already heard it twice. I think we're all very much in favor of this project. It fits the downtown redevelopment. It fits the revitalization downtown. There's several pages of comments here so far that you just heard. Maybe you can give us a little bit of an overview of
Exactly.
what's planned for it. But I'd also like to understand, as Pat mentioned, the front parking area, went by there again tonight. You get that white fence there. What's going to happen with that? That's right on the road. Pat mentioned, I also had some notes on the easement on the parking. I think it's from the school. What are you going to do with that? And then we played a role as the architectural review also. So what's your finishes going to be like? What's the site going to look like? Are you going to supply any renderings? There's a lot to do. We all want to make it work, but we get one shot at doing this right. So maybe give us a little bit overview of this.
Okay, initially when we came to the building department, we had a building permit to do the renovation. Mike indicated in his memo that we increased the size of the building, and that's absolutely incorrect.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Mike indicated in his memo that we increased the size of the building and we did not stay within the guidelines of the building permit. And that's incorrect. What happened is there was a jog in the front. I'm sure you're all familiar with that restaurant. You've gone into that 45-degree angle when you walked in. The front of the building that encroached, that was close to Route 6, was pushed back, okay? And the side that was back was pushed forward. So the increase in square footage was absolutely minimum, possibly negative 10, 15 square feet less than what the building originally was. So there was no increase in the square footage. And the reason why it was done that way, the roof line above it was to go straight. So the location of that wall really was an insignificant relationship to the construction. It did not change anything except make it prettier, one straight without that 45-degree angle with the 6-foot walls and what have you. But that's not nor here nor there. The renovation that's proposed, as you see, the building is going to be really, and we will address the type of finishes, possibly the colors on it, the roof, the material, et cetera, et cetera. We will submit that. The parking, we do have an exact record of what the parking was approved in the original site plan, and we are going back to that. We are, and the attorney will address that, in the process of contacting the school district to lease that section and create additional parking. This property had had a variance for the number of parking spaces in the past, when it used to be a catering hall and a restaurant. I think they had a variance for 55 parking spaces, or 50, somewhere in that number, and 57. There was a variance for 57 parking spaces. That does not apply to us because that was site-specific for that particular use, that it's no longer in existence. But all the other variants, such as aisle width, size of parking spaces, et cetera, setbacks, lot width, lot depth, those have been granted, and we'll be more than happy to submit. I thought, we submitted a copy of the original site plan that was approved with a list of but it was brought to my attention that was on such a small scale that it was not legible, so we will address that.
And Willie,
The
just one
majority-
of the problems with respect to that is there's no striping left on the site. So whatever was
Exactly.
approved has been erased by time.
Correct. What we will do is we will go back with the original. If we do not succeed, we are in the process right now to try and get an easement agreement rented from them, buy it from them, however it's going to be. If we can talk to somebody, if somebody will return the phone calls or the emails or even written letter, we're going to try and hopefully, the board may send a memo or something to them, just communicate with these people. We'll be taking a small portion of probably approximately 18 or 1,900 square feet. It's a tiny little space, but it will make a major difference because the property line is on an angle. Just to straighten it out will give us all the space, the 24-foot wide aisles, everything else that we need.
Is this the space, if you're looking at the building on the right-hand side there?
Correct.
Yep.
There is, as we showed it, and I actually tweaked it a little bit, and I was able to get one additional parking space than the originally approved site plan. And I made the aisle width a little bit wider than was granted a variance for. As we said, the whole thing was intended to renovate the building, and we was planning on coming back to the planning board. We would been trying to get the easement for 6-7 months, maybe more. Mike tried, spoke with the town supervisor here and there. And eventually we got a stop work order based on that change of line. And I really want to address this with this board and ask for your help on this. That building as is dangerous to the public. Mike found drug paraphernalia in that building, okay? It's open. All we wanted to do is just give us permission. Okay, we agree with the stop work order. We're not arguing at that point. Just let's close it to the weather and to the public where nobody can walk in there.
So with that, I would
And
say,
take the eyesore. The building looks horrible.
so Willie, what I would say to that, Mike Canaz is away currently.
Uh-huh.
See Mike and talk to Mike when he gets back. And
Well,
Okay,
in regard to Mike not being here, I just wanted to clarify something. Mike's memo said not that you changed square footage, but the footprint of the building changed, and that's why he issued the
I
stop
thought
work
I
order.
heard you say something as increase the square
No,
footage.
he said footprint.
He said
His-
foot- so I just-
Increase the footprint, that's
In
what I
Mike's
said.
absence, I just
You
wanted to
increased
clarify
the
that.
footprint. You went outside the existing footprint.
And one areas we went inside the existing footprint.
But it
So it was
changed.
like, which is fine, it's not, all we asking right
Right,
now,
well,
we're not asking to operate, we're
I
not
just
asking,
wanted to- Mike's
it's
not
just to
here today.
close the building to the weather and make it safer to the public, and maybe put the windows and the siding and just make it look pretty while we going through this process. All the other comments that I heard are completely addressable. The majority of the stuff is existing, and we will deal with the DOT and DEC. One issue that you mentioned, and when we filled the short environmental assessment form on this, it came out that there is wetland on the property. The property is basically covered almost 100%.
Yeah, I didn't make that comment in my memo.
No. We made the comment. We introduced that, but that was part of the website of New York State DEC. The other item that you mentioned is the retaining wall. That's existing retaining wall. The other retaining wall on the side that he's repairing is maximum 30 inches, possibly less.
You got to show the details. Nothing's on the
We can
drawing.
show that, there's no
Top
problem.
and
Just
bottom
want-
elevation, so
Yeah.
information, the more you can give us, the better, Willie.
I understand.
You know, when you go and look at the site, there's a half-built retaining wall. Yes, I know it might be a safety issue, but there's no details on your drawing. The back retaining wall does need a little tender loving care, as does the landscaping back there.
Uh-huh.
So
We
you
will
might
address
want to
that.
look into that. So
I
those
just
are
want
the
to bring to
comments. We're
attention-
trying to make the site better. You guys are going to do a great job at the back end of it, but, we need to look at it this way.
Okay, really, the comments that you said, they're all addressable. I don't see any issues with them.
so
You know, we're not gonna
actually,
argue. I just wanted to clarify, and my main concern is to try and get some kind of a permission to close the building to the weather and to the public,
And
you
that
know?
you should speak to Mike about when Mike gets back, since he issued it. I'd also like to know, you didn't touch on what the upstairs of the building.
The upstairs right now was part of the design. As of now, there is no proposed use for it whatsoever. It's not gonna even be finished.
It's not going to
if-
be finished.
No. If
Okay.
we are to finish it and to use it, and we will like to do that, we will come back to the board, but the only way we could use that is by getting the easement. When I get the easement, we will have much more additional parking than we need, and we'll cover the need for the parking upstairs, and we will not need any variances for number of parking spaces.
Okay.
But as of now, and I will indicate that on the next, in the revised drawings with the changes, that the second floor will be completely unfinished, not necessarily unused, but just unfinished too.
What is the anticipated use of the second floor?
The anticipated use of the second floor is going to be mainly, right now, there is a small section of second floor that's legal and part of the building, which is, in restaurants, you're required to have storage for liquor. Safe, secure storage for liquor. This building has no basement. The majority of restaurants have it in the basement. That's what it's used for. And the business office of the restaurant. They do the payroll, they do the ordering, et cetera, et cetera. As of now, the existing second floor will remain as is. It's untouched, unchanged. There's nothing's gonna be added to it. But if once we have the parking, we would like to create an office space up there, and if it's possibly to be rented, we will be rented. Portion of it will be used by the owner for the Vietnamese restaurant that's being proposed in that area. But at this stage, it's completely unfinished, and if anything to be done with it, we will be coming back to see you guys.
So right now, you're thinking coffee shop, you're thinking Vietnamese restaurant. Do you have other thoughts in mind?
There's a cell phone interested, there's Carvel interested in there, and there's some other item. And this is a retail store right now, we don't have anybody interested, but we're gonna leave it as a retail store to see, hopefully a tenant will be interested in it. It's strictly all these, the coffee shop is gonna be no seating in there, strictly just takeout. That's coffee, pastry, whatever people stop, pick up and go. And the beauty of this now versus the old use, the new use is like the different times where it's gonna be busy for different stores. Some are gonna be busy in the morning, some are gonna be busy during the day, and the restaurant will have to be busy in the evening. So it balances out with the proposed uses for this building versus what was there. I mean, I remember I had a couple of parties, two of the christening of my daughters were there, we had an engagement party. Everybody parked in the fire department, no matter how you slice it, the parking in there, yeah, there's parking on the street, nobody's gonna go half a mile up on the side of Route 6, so this proposal kind of conforms to the requirement parking of the town.
Let me ask the board if they have any other, we've had a little bit of a dialogue already, but let me ask the board if they have any other questions on this.
Do you have any preliminary renditions, elevations, views?
This is basically the floor plan, the front elevation of the building.
Willie, you got to take that remote microphone with you, otherwise they'll never be able to, it's not on.
I thought I was loud enough, they could hear
There's a
me.
remote one right there on the table,
He took it.
oh, he took it with him?
Wasn't working.
Okay.
There you go.
Thank you.
Yeah, we just provided the rendition of the side that you see it when you drive, and the front. You're gonna have like a small covered sidewalk, and mostly is gonna be, the functionality is more aesthetics versus anything else. Stone pillars, columns, sign spaced very well defined. I mean, we call it sign space, but most likely it's gonna be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 signs up there. They will confirm, and we will comply with the town requirements on
Michael,
that.
I'm sure will comment on this.
And, if you remember the front, that place was like, I mean, really, was an eyesore. So now it's going to be like a normal-looking building.
It's got the makings of what the town is looking for, so.
Say that again?
I said, it's heading in the direction of what the town is looking for.
Exactly.
Eventually, we'll want to see samples and. so
We
forth.
have no problem with that, and we will work with you. And Mr. Gu has done a great job with Mr. Miller's old building in town when he did Kubu. He did not really skimp on finishes and the decorations, what have you. And this will be following the same direction. We will give a planting and landscaping suggestions of what we're going to do, considering the minimum amount of a green area that we can landscape. Like, the idea is to really beautify it and make it good, and that's beneficiary for the owner, beneficiary for the town, so it helps both ways.
Willie, some of what I've heard from you is a little bit of uncertainty as to the traffic and the usage and such, but the question I have for you is, with water and wastewater, you got to have some pretty solid calculations as part of the application process. So, I mean, what are your thoughts?
I mean, we can analyze it from the guidelines of the county and see what the water flow, to give the town engineer a better idea of what the usage going to be. It's definitely going to be a lot less than what was there, and as sewage usage. I mean, one big party in there, that dishwasher and everything is going to be going 24/7. So I don't know if I can compare both of them, but we can definitely give a report that the businesses that are proposed are very minimum, wastewater going to be coming out of them.
Well,
Right,
obviously,
so-
that's going to be a big part of the application process.
Say that again?
That's going to be something you're going to have to give us.
We will have no problem with that. Like I said, what Richie mentioned, all these items are addressable.
Right, they're addressable, but you're going to have to deal with the DEP on addressing wastewater from that facility, because it goes into our collection system, but into the plant right across the street. You're going to have to deal with the DEP, and they're going to want those numbers, so you're going to have to do that
We have no
comparison, what was
problem,
there and what's going to happen in the future, so.
Okay.
That would be my guess,
We'll
so.
deal with them, and if we have to do, we'll give them comparison to what it was and what it is. I mean, the stormwater management really does not change because we're not proposing any new impervious. As a
Right,
matter of
but-
fact, I'm reclaiming some of the existing impervious area.
Right,
And
but
I
where-
can
where's
analyze
the
that
dr-
and give them that this is what we had and this is what we will have. So we're gonna have, going in a negative direction with.
Does
it.
drainage go into the storm sewer? Does it go into the sewer? If it goes into the sewer, it needs to be disconnected, because you can't have an inflow like that.
As
So I don't
far
know
as
where
I
the
know,
roof gutter
nothing goes-
leaders go.
nothing
You gotta
goes-
show all that info.
Nothing goes into the sewer. The stormwater goes into the catch basins that are on site.
That's what
Sure,
that's what my comment was trying to get to.
Okay,
so.
yeah. Like I said, the comments that you have, we will deal with them and we'll address them.
I did mention to the board that possibly traffic study might be needed, considering Willie mentioned the various uses at various different times. We would want to know what's going to happen there, right? You
Traffic
have-
study?
You have a fire department across the street, and you have 3 or 4 different uses in this particular facility, where you only had one use before, where it might have only been at night. You're mentioning now that you're going to have traffic in the morning, traffic in the day, traffic at night. You've now tripled the amount of traffic going there.
No, that's not gonna be terrific.
Well, I don't know that
triple the
until
amount
you
of
would give some
traffic.
kind of information
It's
on
gonna
that.
be more scattered without having a concentration load.
So Willie, you can document that very easily.
Right.
So that's all we're asking for, is just
Okay.
give us that story. That becomes embedded in the approval. So
More
you-
like a traffic analysis versus traffic study.
So
Yes,
we don't,
that's
we
more,
wouldn't
you
know if we need a traffic study
That's-
until you give
that's
us
no
the traffic
problem.
analysis. So
Okay,
one
traffic
step at a
analysis
time.
is absolutely no problem.
Yep.
Okay?
I think what you're hearing tonight from everybody is everyone thinks it's a great project. Michael's got a very good reputation for the work he's done in town. We know he's going to beautify the area. We just want to help you get these things done. You need to meet with the board, the consultants, and start checking off these and providing Rich and Mike and
And-
Pat the needed data.
We absolutely have no problem with this. The only thing that I really ask the board, the help with the board on this, is for us to give us a permission just to go and close the building.
And-
Willie, this board doesn't have jurisdiction over that, okay? That's a zoning issue that's going to be dealt with. It's a zoning enforcement issue. It's going to be dealt with the building inspector. If you're not happy with the building inspector's decision, then you've got to go to the zoning board of appeals. So this board really doesn't have jurisdiction over that. So I was going to say something before, but now you brought it up again. It's Mike's decision This is not the Court of Appeals for a building inspector's decision. The Zoning Board of Appeals handles that. So if you wish to appeal his decision, that's the venue that you would go to. However, in light of the fact that you've now addressed the issue, brought this matter before the planning board, I will have a conversation with the building inspector so that you can do what you need to do to tidy up the place, get it secure, make sure it's watertight, and you're not wasting money.
Thank you
Willie,
very much,
that's why
Mr.
I've said to you
Charbonneau.
th-
This is, that's all I'm asking for,
Willie-
nothing more than that.
Willie, I've said it to you 3 times tonight. You need to meet with Mike when he comes back, to Joe's point.
We will talk with him as long as Mr. Charbonneau is willing to talk to him. We are very happy. We really have no issue. Like I said, we just want to tidy up the place, nothing more, nothing less.
Okay, thank
So,
you.
wait, Mr. Chairman, one more thing. We talked about architecture.
Yep.
Will we have a need to bring this to the architect, the outside consulting firm, do you think, or no? If that's the case, that's the board's
think so.
decision, not mine, or the consultant's?
It's already
If the
framed.
board makes that decision, you have to apply for a permit, and then that's the first initial review of the of what you're providing, and then you have to put an escrow up to pay for the rest of theirs.
Heading
So-
is in the right direction, but the
I-
materials, to your point, yes.
Yes. Just, to address that last point, the building is already framed, what have you. I think this board can make decisions, and we'll be more than happy to hear suggestions on the colors. The material is going to be very
And that's
simple
what
and very
what we use
common
our
with the rest of the
architectural
town,
review
with the
board.
rest of the town, okay? The attorney just wants to say a couple more things. Thank you for your time.
I do think, by the way, to answer your question specifically, I do think we will need that, or we should use that architectural review company.
This is going to be,
It's a very key property. We want to do it right. We get one shot at doing this right. So, Rich, to answer your question, yes.
absolutely.
Evening, everybody. Mike Caruso. I'm an attorney for Mr. Grow, who's behind me. And just a quick point to follow up. I've been in touch with Pat Cleary, with Joe Charbonneau on some of the issues when I came on board several weeks back. And both of whom were always very generous with their time, and can't say enough good things. So the board's aware what we have done on our side to resolve the parking issue. We're trying to make inroads with the superintendent.
Please use the microphone, too, for the people on,
Yeah, can you
I
not
can
hear
hear you,
me?
but the people on TV
Sorry.
won't be able
Yeah,
to.
yeah. So we're trying to make inroads with the school district, and I just wanted to update the board on where we're at. I have made several overtures to the superintendent. They haven't been responded to yet. Pat's aware of them, and we've copied him on those transmittals. What we're trying to do is secure the right to use what is unusable property, as you know, along the shared easterly-westerly boundary between the two properties, the Rink property and our property here. The school district's in a unique position. I'm sure Joe is aware of this as well. They cannot convey the property that they hold. They can't even grant us an easement into it. So whatever rights we can secure, they will be inchoate, meaning a license or some form of a intangible agreement to rent with a term. We hope the term will be long. But until we have a dialogue, and we could certainly use any support the board could lend, officially, to open that channel. So we're working on that, and we're certainly trying to make sure that the use profile, obviously we referenced a 57 parking space variance in the history of the property from Gerdsmeyer in '91. That brought the parking level down to 30, and Pat and I have spoke about that briefly. We know we have some changes that have taken place in the code and things that, the world has changed since then, of course. But I think what Willie touched on is our goal here is to present a project that really fulfills more modern criterion. Instead of having a catering hall and a restaurant that swells to max capacity from 7 to 9:30 or 10 during a couple seatings, we want to space that use out so it's a little more steady over the daytime. And certainly the traffic study, or the traffic analysis, I should say, will bear that out. But I just want to let the board know where we are in parking. We're working on that. If we have to establish alternative plans or even a referral to zoning, if we do end up with a delta that we can't solve, we'll be obviously very upfront with that. But we are working, so I just want to let the board know.
Thank you.
So thank you. Have a good night,
Thanks for the
everyone.
clarification.
Thank you.
Is there anything else on this project for Willie? Anything else?
Willie, we'll have Rose mail all the memos to you tomorrow.
I'll discuss it with her tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a
Thank
nice
you.
evening.
You too.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
Can I be heard for a moment?
Sure. Is it pertaining to this?
Yes, sir. Good evening. My name is Mark Constantine. I'm an attorney. I'm here on behalf of several concerned property owners and business owners in
This
the
is
vicinity.
not, this is not an open hearing right now.
I understand that. I just was asking to be recognized. I did submit a letter to your board.
I have not seen your letter.
I understand. I'd like to know one thing, though. There was a reference to this application. I think there was said that the application isn't complete yet. Is that correct?
Complete in what regards?
I think the gentleman, Mr. Franzetti, the town engineer, I think you referenced to the fact that this is not complete.
The application, when it's submitted to the town, is complete. When it's under review by the planning board, there are other items that they may request. So when they refer to it as being incomplete, they're not ready to vote on it tonight.
I
That's what, okay.
Right,
I
they
understand.
would not be here tonight if the application they originally submitted was incomplete. So we review the application when it gets here. That was viewed as complete. These are comments now that when we get the whole package, we review on them.
And this by no means is a public hearing tonight, which there will be ample time for yourself and others to be heard.
I understand, thank you. That's what I wanted to clarify. And with regard to the 1991 variances, is that something that's part of the record? Because I didn't see that online.
I don't know, I didn't write it, like Willie shaking his head, yes?
You know.
I don't know, Mike is the one who wrote that email.
If you want to write a letter, as you mentioned, I'm not prepared to discuss anything that you're asking right now. And like I said, there'll be plenty of time for a public hearing at a later date.
If you have a question with respect to what was submitted, I would suggest that you call the planning board secretary, Rose Trombetta. She'll tell you exactly what's in the planning board file, what's been submitted. You can also submit any letters that you wish on behalf of yourself or any other clients to her directly. That'll be part of the record.
And thank you, I did. I also sent the FOIL request. She referred me to the online application. It didn't include the 1991 variances, so I guess they're part of the record, but not part of the agenda.
When did you submit this letter?
I've only recently been retained, so I submitted the letter, what's today, Wednesday, on Friday, and I submitted a
So that's
letter
why we
today.
haven't seen it.
Yeah, Mr. Consi, I think Rose was answering your question with respect to what the applicant submitted with the current application. There's property records on this site that go back, that's a separate pile of information. So that's available through the clerk's office or through the building department.
I understand. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Willie. The fourth item on the agenda is the Teodora Counseling Center, 18 Miller Road, for an amended site plan.
That was a little scary.
Yes.
I feel like I'm in court. Am I
No,
allowed?
let me ask the consultants
Oh,
to
sure,
speak,
go
and then
ahead.
I'll,
So I have Mike's, Mr. Chairman.
please, thank you.
The applicant proposes to add an existing counseling center over an existing deck. On the code analysis chart, existing no change is not an acceptable answer. The architect needs to look into these code questions and answer the questions. Provide a setback envelope which includes lot depth, lot width, and lines on the plat. Provide a list of all variances on the plat. The town of Carmel requires all applicants clean up, quote-unquote, the property to obtain all necessary variances unless they were previously granted. You label the parking space along Miller Road previously approved, provide the approval. Where on the area location plan is the property, please locate. Provide detail of a trash enclosure, provide the location of the existing tree buffer. Additional buffer may be needed as this is a residential area. Provide a parking calculation, and it appears that several variances will be required. However, I cannot determine without all the information requested. That is from Mike.
And Rich, your comments, please?
So my comments, referral to the Mayapack Fire Department. Any additional information regarding lighting on the site should be provided. They said there was a sheet 6, but it was not provided. There are no real site improvements on the project, so the department does not have any additional comments related to this project, as long as no changes are being made to the site.
Thank you. Thank you. Pat?
So this is as Mike indicated, replacing a deck on the second floor behind the building. I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's a small little building. It kind of sits by itself with an extension of about 300 square feet off the back of the building. A very modest improvement. So there's really a couple of things with respect to this. They are proposing to use the existing structural supports that support the deck for the building. So the structural integrity of those columns and so forth need to be verified. The reason why that's significant is if they have to replace those, if there are new foundations or footings that are necessary, that is within a setback of a fairly large wetland area that's in the back, they require permission for that. So that needs to be clarified. The parking was, so there's an existing parking area that's off Miller Road in the front of the building, which was approved a while back by the zoning board for one parallel handicap parking space. It's not striped out for that anymore, and it's really used for perpendicular parking most of the time for folks that are attending or going to the facility. So it's one or the other. If you want to change that, it should be part of this application. It should be modified from the one handicap to parallel spaces. It's in the right-of-way, so it's a town issue. Not many other issues with respect to this. The deck, one other point with respect to the deck, this is a unique facility. It's a counseling center, and the deck may be integral to the operation. If that's where people with addictive issues, that's where you sit to smoke, if you're having that sort of thing. So if a deck will be required in the future for this type of facility, tell us about that. If it's not necessary and you can lose the deck, let us know about that. So that's it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I did drive by there the other day. Maybe you can introduce yourself, and then I'll ask you to tell us what you do there. Give us a little overview of your mission, maybe, so we can help understand the project
Sure.
and possibly assist
Can I
you.
give out pamphlets, or we're not allowed to do that?
I'm sorry?
Can I give these out? You guys could kind of see it?
Sure, it's up to the people that want to handle anything. You can,
Okay. Fred,
I
can you
got my
just leave
glove.
this now?
yeah, you can leave one in front of everybody, and it'll be
Okay,
up to
just
them
so you
if they
guys have a
wanna-
visual, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I created the Teal Door Counseling Center about a year and a half ago. I worked at a very large practice called Carmel Psychological and Associates. It's like a big, big practice. He's a big
I'm going to
fish.
ask you to speak hard into the microphone
Yeah,
if you don't.
sure.
It's tough with the mask, I understand.
So I came from a larger mental health practice. I was a therapist for Carmel Psychological and Associates. They're a big, large practice. A year and a half ago, I went out on my own and I created this small practice. It's more of a center than a clinic. So we are a private practice of 12 therapists, including our nurse practitioner that does medication. So what we're kind of bringing a different feel to mental health. When you come into our practice, it's much more familiar and comfortable than coming into a agency kind of clinic, where it's like cold. When you come into this practice, I renovated the inside, we kind of did paint, we did some nice stuff in there, and we changed the whole dynamic of mental health. It feels like you're coming to someone's house, right? It's almost like a spa when you come in there. We spoil them so much. So we treat all different ages, kids, families, couples. We do it all, seniors as well. And we're at the point now where we're just getting too big. We've had such a wonderful response from our community and our schools. All the doctors are referring to us now because what's happening is mental health is becoming such a bigger thing, and there's only one big practice to send them to, which is Carmel Psych, and they're backed up for like 3 months. We work a different way where we're able to get people in a little bit quicker. Sometimes like maybe a patient will come, a woman, and then all of a sudden we end up with the husband and the kids, and we have the whole family there. So we get filled up quickly, but I'm really small. I'm only like 800 square feet, the whole building. So we're 3 offices. I have a little teeny tiny waiting room. And what we want to do is off the back is a big deck that's kind of useless. We don't need a deck for any reasons. So what's happening is we have this big deck, and we wanted to put one room that's a little bit bigger so that we could have group meetings for my staff, because we're a staff of 12, but my staff is on a rotating schedule. So when you're in private practice, you would work like 2 full days, and that would be considered full-time. You work 2 full days or 2.5 days, and then the next therapist would come in for the remaining of the week. So we kind of alternate. What we're also doing now, because of the pandemic, is a lot of our patients are doing telehealth now, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. We don't love it, but we do it. So some patients are comfortable coming in, and then we stagger them between a telehealth session and a patient that may come in. So we're not a high-volume practice, one, because we're so small, but it's more about having the staff there and securing their office space and making it comfortable for patients. But now what's happening is we have this deck. We want to put one big room off the back, a little bit bigger. Now, I'm going to remind you that the 3 offices we have now are like 10 by 11. They're very small. You know, it's enough for just 2 people in there. I can't put a staff of people in there. So I have to spend all this money to go on, you know, a dinner to have a staff meeting. So we would have one room that's a little bit bigger where we could have our staff. And then we would have another office kind of the same size. It's like 11 by 10, where I could put myself and kind of keep some like confidential documents in there for storage and things like that. So our plans is to get a little bit bigger because we're getting such a great response from the community, and I want to continue to kind of grow that. So that's been our plan. So I've been working with Fred, where he's been our contractor, and figuring out how to do that. It's not really changing much of the structure of the building. If you're looking at the building, it kind of comes up a little bit. It doesn't really change much. You really can't see it from the front. There's no neighbors on either side of me. It's just like, you know, woods. And across the street is Dr. Rooney, who is in full support of like helping us grow. We get a lot of his patients too, so they love going back and forth. Do you have any questions that I missed?
So is it,
Yeah.
are you actually trying to enclose the existing deck to make it a room that you can use all year long?
Yeah, we would have 2 more offices. One would be a group room, more of like a staff room, and the other one would be another office for myself. So
Okay,
now
so Pat, I think you mentioned that, then that would be something that Rich or Mike or whomever would have to verify that those columns can hold that room, right?
So those columns there are built on 6 by 6. I know a little bit about this. So when I bought the place a year and a half ago, everyone was telling me like, you got to do something with this deck because it was built almost like she was thinking of expanding because it's almost like unnecessary. It's built on 6 by 6, and they're in the ground, boy, and it's big for just a deck, you know. So it could hold that kind of capacity. That was one of my first questions I asked Fred, the contractor. I was like, is this possible? And he was like, absolutely. It's built on such big 6 by 6s.
Let me ask you the board, I went out there today, it's a nice little building, it's an attractive little building.
Yeah, it's cute, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Thoughts, questions from anyone on the board?
Okay.
Please speak loud into the microphone though.
Okay, good evening, gentlemen. Mike Finelli is the architect. He was scheduled to be here last week, but when the meeting got changed.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
Mike Finelli
Okay.
was the architect. He was scheduled last week for this meeting, but he's not available now. He's on vacation. So he has done the design. He did the analysis. He's a licensed architect. He stamped the plan. So he is the one that did all the structural and all of the elevations. So I think you have that. It's all here. So if there's any questions as far as the structure, we can jot them down. I can get in touch with Mike. He can get right back to you.
Okay.
I'm just a carpentry contractor. I'm following the plans.
No, that's
But
fine.
he analyzed everything, and he's the one that did the complete design and all of the research that was necessary.
Anybody have any questions for this project? Pat, Rich, I think they should, I like the idea, but I think it's more of an engineering and Mike Canazza review, right?
It's definitely more Mike. He had some comments about additional information that was needed, so variances were the big ones.
I would say, correct me if I'm wrong here, Rich, but I would say if they could schedule some time with Mike to thin out these comments. I think the intent is great. I think the business need is apparent from how busy you are. We do have, a page and a half, 2 pages of comments that we can share with you, and you can, work with the consultants and complete them.
That would be your next step.
From memory, I think a lot of the comments are addressed, and they're on there as far as setbacks and.
Well,
Pretty sure they're on
Mike's
the-
not here, so I can't speak to Mike's comments
but-
and his review of the drawing. So it would really be up to Mike. A lot of the comments were coming from Mike Carnazza.
Do you know when he'll be back, Rich?
I do not. I think another week or so, maybe 2? Next
He'll
week.
be
Dave.
back next week.
I'm pretty sure that was addressed, and it's all basically
Well,
on
we just
the
need-
documents in front of us.
I would call Rose, the secretary, and try to schedule some time with Mike for next week, so we can proceed, you know, we want to, we don't want to hold you up. But we do need these comments addressed, and we can't speak to Mike's comments. Mike's not here.
Okay.
I mean,
Right, so you'd have to have your architect or whoever develop the drawings, just reach out to Mike Carnazza and the engineering department. There weren't many comments on my end, or if there were any from Pat, but to reach out and just try to either set up a meeting with Mike or try to just do it through email to get those all those concerns addressed. And then you'd get on either the next agenda, if it could be done in the next 2 weeks, and then we can, you know, approve it or whatever. It's up to the board. After that, the board can move
would
forward.
Rose have these comments available to them tomorrow?
Yes.
So if you want to see Rose, look, we want to speed this up too. We're not trying to kick this down the road. If you want to see Rose tomorrow, get a copy of the comments that we're looking at tonight and respond to each one of them to, you know, Mike and Rich. Great, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Rose will email whoever the contact was that
I
she
know
has
that
on
Rose
record.
was back and forth a lot with the architect. Like, they were, like, it's got to be like 6 months, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So I
Right.
feel like a lot, that's why we're saying we felt like a lot of these things were answered because they were in communication a lot. Because this started almost a year ago, this project. And we
Right.
made sure that we hit every detail before we sat in front of you. So it went on for some time because I know everyone's kind of been in touch, you know, for a while now. So I guess we'll look at them and we'll go back to him.
Yeah.
But I know my architect was in touch with Rose a lot and making sure that we had everything crossed and everything dotted before standing in front of you, but maybe there's something that's missed.
Do you have a date on Mike's comment?
Yeah, is there a date on that?
This is the first time this board's seeing this.
Right, yeah, we
So
wanted to make sure all
his
that was all
comment
good.
was dated June 30th, so 2 weeks ago now. So I don't know what's gone on
Okay.
between here and then, but.
Okay, so something came up. Okay, we'll look into it.
Yeah, well, Rose will get you all the comments, and then, you know, you can have your architect look at them, and then we go forward from there.
Latest revision on the drawing date is.
What's the, Anthony was just mentioning, what's the revision dates on your drawings?
Fred, is there a revision date on that drawing? What's the date of the latest revision? That'll answer it right there.
6/25/20, planning board submission number 2.
So Mike's comments precede that.
11/26/19, planning board submission number 1.
I know we printed these out a few different times, so he wanted to make sure we had the most latest.
So Mike's comments are probably on these.
Yeah, Mike's comments followed, yeah.
We could stand here, you really need to
Okay.
talk to Mike.
Okay,
Get the comments from Rose tomorrow and work with Mike on resolving them. And then we'll see you back in 2 weeks.
okay. Looking forward to it. Thank you.
And you can tell Rose when you see her tomorrow, if you see her tomorrow, is that, to hold a spot for you in the next meeting, if you're going to be prepared for it.
In 2 weeks.
Yep,
Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
thank you. Next on the agenda, Stillwater Business Park, 105 Stillwater Road, site plan. Rich, do you want to read Mike's, if you don't mind?
No problem. It's dated July 2nd. The applicant proposes to merge 3 commercial lots, remove existing house, pre-existing non-conforming 2-family, and a small garage, legalize an existing real storage building, relocate a storage building that was built without approvals, and add a large storage building, all to bring the site into conformity with the exception of one necessary variance. Mike's question is, what is the proposed use for the second floor of the larger building? The large building needs to be corrected. Plat shows 60,000 square foot footprint, 2-story storage building. It is a 30,000 square foot footprint, 2-story building, which totals 60,000 square foot. A variance is required from the ZBA for the rear storage building, 30-foot rear required, 25 provided, 5-foot variance needed. Provide the location of the existing tree buffer. Additional buffer may be needed as there is residential area across the street. Could it be extended across by the scale? Any areas that would be used for outdoor storage need to be located on the plat. Variance will be required for any outdoor storage areas. The project should be referred to the ECB for comments. That's the Environmental Conservation Board.
And yourself, your own, Rich?
So the applicant seeks to extinguish the property lines between tax map 7517-153, 865125, and 865-1-26. On the combined lot, the applicant seeks to demolish the existing residence, relocating the existing 5,000 square foot storage building, and construct a new 60,000 square foot storage building, which is really 30,000 per Mike's comments. It would also require site grading, retaining wall, stormwater management practice, and repavement of a portion of the lot. So preliminary comments on this, general comments are, referrals would be warranted for the Putnam County Department of Health, Mahopac Fire Department, Town of Carmel Highway, Town of Carmel Environmental Conservation Board. Permits may be needed from Town of Carmel Highway for a driveway permit, New York State DEC under General Permit GP 020001, New York City DEP, per the watershed rules and regulations, permits are required within a limiting distance to reservoir and reservoir stems, the ECB for work in the wetlands buffer. The area of disturbance for the work is 1.8 acres. The threshold for disturbance of regulations is between 5,000 square feet and 1 acre and over 1 acre. This will require coverage under the state general stormwater permit that has permanent stormwater controls. All regrading required to accomplish the intended development should be provided. It's unclear from the drawing of the extent of cut and fill proposed at the site. Traffic vehicle movement plan should be provided, which shows how vehicles will move through the site, all turning radii, site distances in the driveway, slopes at the entrance, and the new entrance need to be defined. A light spill plan should be provided. All existing and proposed easements on the site must be provided. The applicant may be required to supply a stormwater maintenance agreement per the town code 15685 and 87B respectively. And should any public improvements be necessary, a performance bond and associated fee may be established for this work. There are detailed comments. I'm not going to go through them, but it does talk about the landscaping. Address the same thing that Mike did, is bringing the existing tree line closer to the scale. They should provide top and bottom wall elevations and drainage system profiles and design criteria for the stormwater management practices. And the fact that there's depth to groundwater in the area where the unit is being installed, that needs to be provided per state code. And after that, they can get there's other details that they can address.
Thank you, Rich. Pat?
So a few things, Mr. Chairman. The first is the merger of the property is theoretically fine. However, we have to understand if there are any encumbrances on those properties, if there's anything that would be affected by merging those properties. And of course, the merger has to precede your site plan approval in order for you to grant approval on the merged site. The primary issue relates to what's the building used for. So is this still going to be used as a separate freestanding, is it going to be used as a separate freestanding site or part of the Liffey building next door? The big issue is, we've seen this site before. It's a mess, frankly, the way this parcel is used. There's vehicles all over the place, trucks stored kind of haphazardly and randomly. Is this building being put in the middle of that, or is this building replacing that? So that's basically the fundamental question. How is this site going to operate? You heard some of the comments about, for example, relocating the existing building. It's an older industrial building. Now it will be brought to the front of the site, right behind that blue house that you see as you drive past it. That blue house is coming down, but right behind that will now be a new industrial building. So you heard both Rich and Mike talk about enhancing the landscaping around there. I think that's vitally important. It should be more robust, and the ability to extend that toward the scale, I think, as everybody has said, would be something we'd want to see. Is the scale remaining? What's the scale operate for? There's a separate gate for the scale. So all of this site operates and how it operates in conjunction with the adjacent property is vital. Rich talked about a traffic circulation plan. Is there circulation between the two sites, or is it simply on the one site? So a lot of the use and operational issues with respect to the property need to be clarified. Issues of utilities to the building, so are you bringing water and sewer into the building or not? Lighting, the plans show wall-mounted light packs on the building, but there's a fairly large parking lot now being redesigned. Are there going to be lights in the parking lot? If not, how are you dealing with that? The issue with respect to minor issues like refuse and recycling, how are you dealing with that sort of stuff? There is a large DEC wetland to the south, I guess, of the site. Are you repaving this parking lot? Are you doing any work in that area? If you are, now we have another involved agency in this particular application. So if that's the case, we should be designating lead agency and doing a coordinated seeker review. So if you could clarify that point, if there's any work in that wetland, that's something the board would want to consider at this point. So I have a number of sort of minor itsy-bitsy comments that you might want to take care of.
Thanks, Pat. Maybe, good evening. Maybe you want to introduce yourself, and I think Pat touched on it, but I think everyone here would benefit from, I've driven back there several times, but I think everyone would benefit from a site overview. There is a lot of stuff happening back there, and I'm glad Pat mentioned it, because also one of my notes is one of the musts of this project moving forward has to be to clean up the site. I mean, it's just, you can't like looking at that every day. It's just, so I think we have an
It's gone on for
opportunity
a
here.
long- It's gone on for a long time in
Yeah.
front of this board.
Yeah, I think we have an opportunity. We want, by the way, we want commercial development. I think we have a good opportunity to raise taxes, if not to generate some tax dollars here for the town, which is always welcome. But we got to clean up this site. But why don't we start off with an overview of the site, who's your tenants, what's it used for, and so on.
Sure. I'm Adam Thyberg from...
Just remind you to speak loud into the microphone with the mask, of course. Thank you.
Adam Thyberg from Insight Engineering Surveying, Landscape Architecture, PC, here representing 1841 Park Ave Realty Corp. This particular site, thank you for the feedback on our submission. I think hit most of the high points, but in terms of a quick overview of the site, the board may recall that this site was subject to review by the town board with referral to the planning board for a zone change a couple years ago that would bring the 3 subject lots from residential designation to commercial. The 2 lots in terms of...
So, just to interrupt you, we did look at that, we did approve that, and I'm not sure what we asked for back then happened either with cleaning up the property.
Has ownership of this property changed?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, so,
Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's going to be a must this time, right?
Understood. So the 2 lots, in terms of generally speaking, the operation, 2 of the lots in recent years have operated as storage facilities. So these are leased storage units that are out there. And the third, as was mentioned, currently contains a dwelling, again, the blue building on Stillwater Road. Given the increased demand for storage in the Hudson Valley, and in particular in response to the COVID emergency, the applicant is seeking to consolidate those storage uses and increase their capacity for those operations, which would go a long way, as you have kind of suggested, to the cleanup of the site. And that was the motivation for the zone change and for the site plan that we've presented for tonight. So that zone change was approved in 2019. We're here tonight to, kind of come full circle on this in these efforts by, 1, bringing the site into conformance with the C-zone requirements, and also improving the site in these few other ways. So just for kind of a, to hit the highlights, again, as was said, we're seeking to combine the lots. We're seeking to take down a non-conforming use on the 105 Stillwater Road lot in the dwelling, move the 1 storage building, as was mentioned, and to put up it is a 30,000 square foot footprint building, 2 floors, making it 60,000 square feet total.
I'm sorry, how tall would this be?
This is 2 stories.
2 stories, thank you.
And so, as was mentioned, in order to accommodate that, we would be looking at a new driveway to Stillwater Road. We would be proposing stormwater infiltration practices, designated parking, loading, building-mounted site lights, as was mentioned. Future submissions will include photometric studies that'll clarify any questions about the light levels. And a few retaining walls will be required as well. No new employees are anticipated as a result of these actions, and no new water or septic services are anticipated or proposed. All the new construction on the site meets town bulk regulations, and as was mentioned, we are seeking a variance for the storage building located in the southern end of the lot. So in addition to discussing the merits of the site plan that we've presented for tonight, we'd request to be referred to the ZBA for their consideration of that required variance. In terms of the specifics of the operations, in subsequent submissions, we can include more detail as far as the operations and the site maneuvers and so on. For this first submission, we kind of showed our access points, our proposed loading, and parking areas. Those details can be, we'll speak with the applicant, and we can suss out the details of exactly how they envision the site operating from there.
The two-story building that you're proposing, is that going to be a self-storage building?
I don't know that if it's going to be self-storage or if that's going to be like a managed storage facility, where that would be controlled by the applicant, or if that would be a self-serve. Let me get you more detail on that.
Also, the planning board plays the role of the architectural review board, which no longer exists. So we would like to know more about your finishes and the construction of the 60,000 square foot building. I'm not sure at this point if we're going to need our consultants, like Rich mentioned earlier on a different project, since this is a storage facility in a commercial area off the road. But let us see what you have planned, and then we'll make that decision.
Absolutely. Yeah, we can get you, renderings or at least colored elevations and some details on the material.
Thank you. Questions from the board on this project? I think the intent is good. I think, having some more commercial development downtown is a real positive for us. It's in a good location. Any other thoughts on this?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if I'm overstepping my bounds, but before we do anything with this going forward, I think that site needs to be cleaned up.
Yep.
That's just my opinion. It's been asked numerous times. You yourself has asked numerous times, and I'm just not inclined to do anything with it until such that site is cleaned up properly. You're gonna have to do it anyway to do your work. So let's see the site cleaned up first.
Just logistically, the procedure for that, I mean,
Well,
certainly we'll talk to the applicant. Or do you have specific requests as to what you'd like to see happen
Well,
prior to?
if you drive in there, I think it becomes pretty apparent when you drive in there what Anthony means. I think what's on the table tonight, Pat, correct me if I'm wrong, is we want to probably declare ourselves, the planning board, as the lead agency.
Yes.
And then if we do that, we'll keep close. I think we can do two things here. I think we can move the project along, but keep control of it if we're the lead agency, because I'm 110% behind Anthony here on the site needs to be cleaned up. And I'll be happy to go out there and tour it with you. But I think what's on the table then tonight is for us to make a motion to declare ourselves a lead agency. Then we could work with you on literally 5 or 6 pages of comments. I'm not sure I've ever seen so many, which isn't a bad thing. It's just it's an involved project. And then we can keep close tabs on it and make sure we execute that benefits both you and us.
And if you recall, Mr. Chairman,
Pat, you guys speak into it. Yeah.
the issue of cleaning up the site, when we talked about this a year ago, the applicant's response was that most of the untidiness is vehicles. They're on wheels. They can be moved and placed into appropriate locations. So it's not as though we're asking them to do a lot to tidy up the site. It's a relatively easy thing to do. So I think that the chairman's right. If you go out there, Adam, and take a look at it, you'll kind of know what we mean by cleaning up the site.
There's some old,
I've been on the site. I'm aware that it's,
Yeah.
that there are issues there, and I'm sure the applicant would be perfectly fine with.
and I ask anyone on the board that has not driven out there to just drive in the gates, tell them you're with the planning board, and just take a look at it. So,
Excuse me.
please, Bob.
I was out there today as well, and I saw what I consider a mess. Question I have is, on the previous submission, a month or a year ago, was cleanup a condition of that grant, that approval?
It's not a condition of approval, so we recommended the zoning amendment to the town board, which eventually changed the zoning. In our referral to the town board, we said the applicant should clean up the site. So it wasn't a condition, it wasn't a requirement. You made it clear that you wanted that done. it wasn't a formal,
Okay.
they're not in non-compliance right now, other than property maintenance issues and normal stuff.
Thank you.
So then in this case, and again, I'm in favor of the project, I think the board's in favor of the project, but I think we would, to Anthony's point, I think we would like to make it conditional that the site gets cleaned up, and it's just moving things, like Pat says. I mean, I think there's even an old fire truck back there, if I remember right, I'm not even sure. But,
So that's the point, Mr. Chairman. So the plan before you has nothing else on the site. That's a clean site.
Yep.
So the question is that in fact what they want to do? Or is once this is approved, all the stuff goes back there and there's the
Right.
fire truck again? But there's no fire truck on that plan.
Mr. Chairman, since it essentially requires a property maintenance issue, my suggestion would be you may want to have Mike Carnazza go out, take a look at it, submit a report so that the applicant has an idea of what needs to be cleaned up, because it sounds like you're asking for some guidance as to in what way, shape, or form that property can be made better so that
Right.
we can move this application along. I think that's really the only way to address it, is have the individual who's charged with the responsibility of enforcing the property maintenance say X, Y, and Z needs to be taken care of. That'll continue to process this.
Exactly. Clean it up is
That-
is
I
vague
mean,
if we have a set.
I think that's a
criteria,
good
then
suggestion.
that'd
I'd even be happy to go out there with Mike. So why don't we do this so we can move the project along, but yet get what we need out of this also, which would be a motion to declare the planning board as the lead agency here.
I'll make a motion to declare the planning board of the town of Carmel as the lead agency on the project before us.
I second it.
Thank you, Bob. All in favor?
Aye.
Is there, I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. One, in reference to the wetland conversation on the property to the west of the subject site. That is completely, the wetland itself is completely off of the site, and to answer the question, none of the development that we are proposing goes into the adjacent area.
Okay. What I might suggest to you too is for you to get with the planning board secretary, Rose, get a copy of the comments so we can do things in parallel. There's literally 5 typewritten pages, which isn't bad necessarily, but you can start working on those with the consultants.
Okay. And there is still the outstanding issue of the required variance on the existing building on the southern end of the property. We were looking hopefully to be referred to zoning, so we could start that process as well.
That won't be tonight, but
I think
we work
after
on,
the next go-around.
yeah, you make a lot of progress on these 5 pages. Mike visits the site, gives them some clear direction on what it is to clean it up, and I think we can keep moving forward. Anthony, you good with that? Any other comments from anyone? Thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Next on the agenda, Old Forge Estates, Baldwin Place Road. It's for a cluster subdivision. I know Rich Mike had no comments. I believe you had a couple.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is, this was supposed to be in front of us way back in March, in the good old days, so to speak. It encompasses a proposal to amend the conventional 10-lot subdivision on a 45.3-acre parcel to a cluster subdivision of 14 units per section 15645 of the Town of Carmel Town Code. We provided general comments to referral to the Mahopac Falls Volunteer Fire Department. They have responded to the applicant regarding fire flow and moving a flushing hydrant. Town of Carmel Highway, the applicant said the permit is not required. Environmental Conservation Board, the applicant has noted the comment has been indicated and the application will be submitted to the ECB upon referral from the Planning Board. Putnam County Department of Highway, access to Baldwin Road. The applicant has noted this comment and provided a copy of the November 16th, 2010 signed drawing from Putnam County Highway, so that's good. New York State DEC, general permit for groundwater discharge and general permit for stormwater. The applicant has noted the need for both permits, and The SSTS permit will be applied for, and the stormwater permit will be updated, and it needs to be updated to meet the GP 020-001 requirements. New York City DEP has noted comments has been submitted regarding intermediate subsurface sewer treatment permit and a stormwater treatment plant approval, treatment prevention plan approval. They have approved it. The need for both permits were applied. A SWIP as detailed in New York City Department of Rules and Regulations is needed. Internally, it's ongoing. The applicant noted that in order for DEP to commence review, the state and seeker determination from the planning board is required. This department has no objection to moving forward with the seeker process on our end. Other than that, these comments have been provided to the applicant. Graphic representation, profiles of roads, driveway profiles. Some of the comments have been addressed, and some of them still need to be looked at, but they will be looked at by the applicant.
And Pat, I don't believe you had any comments.
No, but Mr. Chairman, this project has a long history. It has evolved from the conventional subdivision to the cluster plan, which is a superior plan to what you had before, no question about it. Paul has addressed most of the technical issues with respect to this, and the project simply got sidetracked with the pandemic. That's why it's lost its wind in its sails. So really, Paul's back tonight, I think, to regain the momentum that he had a number of months ago. The next step would be the neg deck, which I think Paul is asking for at this point. Typically, you do that when you're close to preliminary approval as well. So if we've narrowed that gap with the preliminary approval issues, we can consider the preparation of the negative declaration so they can go to DEP and finish up with DEP.
So, thanks, Pat. Paul, I would ask you, I'm not sure all the board members are familiar with this project. It's been around for a while.
Correct.
So maybe you give us an overview of the project, how it started, where it is today, and what you're asking for, just to update people that were not on the board when this came forward in the past.
Okay, this project had received a 10-lot subdivision approval probably early 2005, 2006 time period. The approval received its stormwater pollution prevention plan coverage from New York City DEP as well as the New York State DEC. One of the caveats in the development of that 10-lot subdivision is that there was going to be a 300-foot section of road, which was pretty much 2/3 of the way into the development, that was going to be left unpaved because of a determination that we would be crossing, in essence, a second water body. And you're only allowed one paved water crossing at that time. So the owners of the property had difficulty with the real estate end of it being able to build it out and actually be able to sell lots if they're going to have a road that wasn't going to be able to be dedicated to the town, as well as having the costs associated with maintaining basically a 300-foot gravel road in the middle of your paved road. So that's how we ended up going back and looking at clustering the project. And the clustering actually disturbs much less area. It takes the 3-acre lots, and we're going to basically reduce them in size to about a third of a lot of 30,000 square foot size lots, 26,000 or so, in that range. And everything will be tightly kept together. So our stormwater will be compact. We'll have infiltration in one area. We'll have a stormwater pond, and then there'll be 2 other infiltration areas as you get closer to Baldwin Place Road. There'll be a central sewage system instead of individual septics that were originally approved. The septic areas have been reviewed. The deep tests are all done. The percolation tests are done. And there'll be 3 actual systems. 2 systems work and 1 system rests. And every year you take the one that's resting, put it online, and take one of the other fields offline. So it's a community system. Very similar to what we did at Kennecott Hill Road with Random Ridge. So you're going to have the same type of field, except the lots will be bigger here.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board on this project?
Can you talk a little bit about the open space? Is it just being left the way it is, or what's the intention there?
So probably what, two-thirds of this will be open space, give or take?
Yeah.
It'll just, my question
Yes.
is, what's going to happen to it? Is
Oh,
it
it
just
remains green.
Remains
It
as it
does
is.
not get developed.
Okay. And another question, the individual buildings, they're single-family?
Yes.
Are they going to be sold as outright, condos, rentals? What's the intention?
There'll be individual residential houses, whether they're built on speculation and sold, or whether or not they wait for, someone to decide that they want to build a certain house on the lot, then they would go ahead and do that.
Thank you.
And any idea on the time frame of the construction?
Last year,
Yeah.
they really want to build this project out.
Okay. If there's no further comments, Pat, you'll prepare a resolution? Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you. Okay, last on tonight's agenda is Centennial Golf Club, New York City LLC, Fast Street, amendment to zoning. Discussion? Rich, last time you got a cover from Mike tonight. Would you read Mike's comments, please?
I do. I will, thank you. So Mike wrote this, the current town zoning code 15645 residential cluster subdivision allows what the applicant is requesting. However, is allowed at the current zoning, which is R120, and requires 120 square foot lot area per dwelling unit. What is proposed is 6 units per acre, 18 times the permitted density for the rest of the town, 1 unit per 3 acres, with the exception of senior housing, which allows 8 units per acre. Why would we not allow this type of development off of State Road, Route 652 or 301? The proposed amendment only allows this off a county road. At a density of 6 units per acre, municipal sewer and water should both be required. All units should require 2 parking spaces and an additional 30% for visitors. Setbacks from the front yard should be at least 40 foot as required in the rest of the town. If somebody has 20 acres and builds 40-unit building that is 40 foot tall, that should be required to have a setback at least as far as a new one-family dwelling. Only 50 square foot of recreation space is required per dwelling unit. This is the size of a quarter of the parking space. 300 square foot of recreation space is required per dwelling unit on a senior housing. I think at least as much recreation space should be required for families with kids as is required for seniors. And to that end, and this open space shall be deeded in perpetuity to remain forever open space, or whatever legal terminology needs to be added to protect the town from this being developed in the future. This submission is really spot zoning. There is no other parcel in the town of Carmel that can meet this criteria of this code. No other golf course is on a county road and has sewer and water. I have no comments myself, Mr. Chairman.
Pat, you're not going to read all your comments, are
No,
you?
just to summarize, when this application was before you a few months ago, they had proposed changing the zoning of this property. They've abandoned that approach and now are proposing to keep the zoning in place, but modify the country club use provisions to allow clustered subdivision on a country club property at the density that Mike referenced before. Bill made reference to something called conditional zoning. This is actually not conditional zoning. This is a permanent change to the zoning. It's a conditional use, like 29 other of our conditional uses. We have a whole host of different conditional uses. The use is allowable subject to those criteria. The zoning's not conditional, so this change is a permanent change to the zoning. So we're in the weeds of zoning law and so forth at the moment, and I don't think we have to discuss that at the moment. The fundamental issue is this primary change in tactics, which is keeping the zoning in place and adding this provision to the club use to allow residential cluster development. I just want to point out one thing. if the zone remains the way it is today, a cluster residential use, is an allowable use in that zone today. Not at the density that's proposed, but the use is already allowed in that zoning district as it is today in the residential zone. So that's just something to bear in mind. The issue of spot zoning Mike raised, the applicant has to defend that position, and that's basically the summary of my.
So Pat, did you just say that cluster housing is allowable?
So in our
by
residential
code
zone,
there
that's
today?
correct. Under that, our cluster zoning provision, you are allowed, subject to the formula that exists in the code, that deducts environmental constraints and utilities and roadways and so forth. You come up with a density in the particular zone based on that formula. So that's allowed in the residential zone now. The country club happens to be located in the residential.
So there are two options that we allow there today. One is what you just mentioned, a cluster, and the other is to go by our 3-acre lot.
So there are two, that's exactly right. There are two ways they can develop homes on that site today as a right, under the conventional 3-acre zoning or under the clustered zoning. It does not give them the density that they are seeking. That's the challenge that the applicant has.
So Pat, you're saying the density that's being proposed is outside of what our code permits?
That's the change that they're basically asking you to consider. That's right.
And under the existing cluster provision, the density would be 32.
I'm sorry about King.
What would be the max density?
So it's interesting, the applicant is proposing to self-limit the density on the property to no more than, I think it's 100 units. The formula, the 6 units per would be 600 units or something like that on that property, but they're self-restricting it to a cap of 100 units.
But before we entertain any change to that they're suggesting, what would be the max density?
I think 50 units, it's 90, I think it's 98 acres, something like that, under the existing.
I thought I read somewhere 32. Is that wrong?
I think it would be 32.
32, that's right, I'm sorry about 32. And unknown using the cluster formula, because you have to go through that exercise of providing the environmental constraints map and the utilities map. So that has not been done, so we don't know what that number is.
All
It
right,
could be more than that.
Good evening, Bill. I'd like to ask you, if you don't mind, I've had some contact with this project the last couple of months, but Pat mentioned it. You've changed your approach to this project. The first time this board has seen this, it was a different approach than what you're doing tonight. So maybe you can give us an overview of what's changed and what you're switching to and from, and just.
Would it be okay? I have a terrible fogging problem.
It's fine, as long as everyone else is okay. You got 10, 12 feet from everybody else.
The answer to your question is, months ago, we had proposed a zoning change pursuant to 15670, which would provide for the return of an R1 in the affected area. After consulting with the consultants here, several members of the town board and our own consulting team, we believed it easier, more efficient, more productive to go forward via text amendment. That is, the text remains the same, the code remains the same, but it's amended to provide for this kind of development for an existing golf course, provided all of the conditions are met. So if I could, Mr. Chairman, if I could just speak briefly about the overview, would that be okay?
Sure.
Dave and Peter Leibowitz are here. They are members of the LLC. Larry Boudreau and Karen Labruto are from Chazen Engineering. And they are here. We presently have 27 holes, as you know, on the golf course, together with all the amenities. And on the site itself is a banquet center, which is autonomous from the golf course, and a restaurant. This is a large staple in the town of Carmel and in the hamlet of Carmel, in that it provides the recreation, the social, the panoramic views that the golf course presents, and considerable green space now. This application, and if you know this already, forgive me, it was 4 months ago, so you may We're only looking to affect the westerly side of the golf course, the 9 holes that runs parallel to Kelly Ridge. And because we're proposing a cluster, the people on Kelly Ridge would not be affected. They would not be part of a construction area. They would not have their views obstructed because the development under the cluster would take part far away from Kelly Ridge. In exchange for the grant of the text amendment and the passing of the text amendment, it would permit the town of Carmel to retain 18 holes, championship golf, and the proposed deed restriction together with the open space would result in 150 acres of open space with much of it deed restricted so that there could be no development, whether it's commercial or residential, on the property. You probably are aware, I know Mr. Cleary is aware of, golf courses all throughout the state, some in Dutchess, some in Westchester, many in Long Island, that have succumbed to the fate that golf courses are experiencing now, and they have effectively turned their keys over to commercial developers and residential developers, hence the golf courses are gone. We propose something that gives you green space forever. And in the end, it's 150 acres when you consider the cluster plus the deed restriction. And I submit to you, this is a directive to you from your own code. And the Greenway connection provides that you should be reaching out for green space, maintaining it and obtaining it. You should be looking out for recreation for your citizens. It's in your code. You've enacted it in 15676. So 15676 talks about zone change, and zone change is a necessary tool that you must have given the dynamics of change within your town. Zone change is not monumental. It's not an experience or an expedition that happens infrequently. It's necessary to address changes that take place. 273 of town law defines the process, and then, as I said before, 15690 directs the town of Carmel Planning and Zoning Board to seek out open space and to seek out recreation. Right in the code, you've enacted it. You're directed to, as part of your job, to seek these things as they consider it beneficial to the town of Carmel. The procedure, as you well know, you go to town board first, and you give them a brief overview, and then we go to you, this board, for recommendations. Now, I've been a party to a board that thinks recommendations is an intrusive review on all of the text amendment and things. And then I've also seen boards, and I've read cases where they consider it a consensus and what's in the best interest of the town type of thing. And then they send it over to the town board where they are the lead agency and they're the ones that hold the public hearing. How you decide how to recommend, of course, is your own, but I will submit to you there are so many positives to what we're proposing tonight. The application was sent from the town board to your board. And again, previously it was to create or revert to a former zone, an R1 zone, and now we seek a text amendment. Again, I want to suggest to you, text amendment is just a simple zone and changes, and it's directed by 15676, as was my previous application, which talked about a reversion to an old R1 zone. The questions raised by your consultants, I'm going to leave to our consultants, except to say that what is benefited by the town would absolutely absolve the town from spot zoning. The benefits that the town would receive, the 150 acres of forever green space, the continuation of the amenities, the continuations of the businesses, the 70 employees there, I would like to be on the other side, and I'm hoping Mr. Charbonneau, if there is another side, would agree with me that it is not spot zoning because the benefits of the town are so clear and so abundant that I think even the mention of spot zone is in error.
But
20
you do agree that it's the only spot in the town of Carmel where this zoning would apply?
Under the text amendment that's before you, yes, and I'm going to leave that to the consultants. But the designation of a type of road that it's found on, we're certainly going to change that. There are 3 golf courses in the town of Carmel, and we don't think there's any reason, and again, I think Karen and Larry will speak to this, the text amendment should be changed to show any golf course on any road. It doesn't have to be a county or a state road. So with that being modified, I believe that any golf course could benefit by this, provided they meet the criteria. 27 holes was approved in 1990. It was a 1-acre zone at the time. They received 162 base units for the elements that were provided them. They've paid over $3 million in those entitlements since 1997. And they're ongoing today. They're paying for the septic or the sewer charges that were imposed upon them when they purchased. Currently, the site serves recreational purposes. It cites social events, dining, and beautiful green space. Unfortunately, over the last 5 years, things have dramatically changed. And it's well documented that failing golf courses are prevalent throughout our area and through the country. It is a fact that outings are down to virtually none, that banquets are way off, that memberships are down and that play is down, to the point where, again, a lot of golf courses have surrendered to developers for commercial or residential development. So over the past 20 years, there's been an irrefutable, substantial change in what was approved to my client 20 years ago. And many golf courses have, as I said, faded away and yielded to full development either by commercial or residential. And the same financial plight is here with my client. They've sustained and continue to sustain devastating losses to the extent that the maintenance of 27 holes is no longer in the cards. It's not there. They cannot do it. And so their losses are great. The maintenance of a 27-hole golf course is beyond their means. And so the issue now is survival. Clear and simple, it's survival. They can't continue under these circumstances. So before the board is a series of choices. Would you like to see the 18 holes stay in place? Would you care to see the restaurant, the banquet area, and the 70 jobs that are currently on the site stay? This is your choice, plus the arrangement that's been made through deed restriction and other open space, through the space given by a cluster development. In the end, there will be 150 acres of undevelopable open space, 150 acres. So you have all those elements, all those benefits. Against this is, if it's voted down, my client, and this isn't a gun to the head, this is reality, they're going to start a conventional subdivision with approximately 96 to 100 lots on the entire tract. That's what their choices are right now, and it's a choice that many golf owners have succumbed to. It's not that they want to, it's just they cannot pay the bills that are before them. So again, I say to you, you know your function tonight, but I want you to consider not only what's being presented, but what will inevitably happen if it's denied. Under the law, there's clear and there's ample authority for what you're doing. Preliminarily, there are 3 or 4 important points. Number one, 15670 is a zone change. It's in every code I've ever seen. It's not a part of the code that's never used. It's used all the time. And creative boards with dynamic circumstances use it and use it to the town's advantage. 15673 is the code section that says what your job is, and it's to give a recommendation. And I say it's to consider the pros and the cons, the attributes and the detriments. The third thing is case law. Case law says you're absolutely free to impose conditions on approval. And if the conditions that are imposed are clearly favorable to the town, spot zoning will be defeated. It will be defeated. And the benefit that the town gets through this proposal are clear. To me, it's unfortunate that I'm even talking about spot zoning because I think it's so far-fetched. And the fourth is 15690, where you are directed to seek to procure and to preserve the open spaces, obtain and preserve, and to look for recreational opportunity for your citizens. So I look for a favorable recommendation. I propose it's warranted. And I want to just discuss that the irrefutable facts are that my client is in financial distress, like many golf courses. Can't afford 27 holes. Won't do it. Won't make it. It's survival. If a favorable recommendation is given and it's ultimately passed, the town of Carmel gets to keep the championship golf course, which is a staple in our community and our town, the restaurant, the banquet center. It gets to keep have in its fold 150 acres of open space never to be developed. The proposal, again, is for 150 acres through cluster, through deed restriction, and through current open space. It's a huge contribution. It's a huge grab for the town of Carmel. Against that, the pros and the cons is an as-of-right conventional subdivision on the entire tract. I'm sorry if it sounds like a gun to the head. I don't mean it to, but this is economic reality. As a person who's lived in this town all my life, I can't for the life of me think that any of the board members would think this is not a worthwhile proposition. It's appropriate because it's envisioned by the town law, it's dictated by the Greenway Pact, and it's authorized by case law. There's nothing in it that's unconventional or not standard. It's all set forth in those 3 treatises and those 3 statutes. So I ask for a favorable recommendation for those circumstances, and I ask the board to think long and hard about what's in front of you, to think about the town of Carmel, to think about the jobs, the recreation, the open space. And I submit to you respectfully, if it's denied, I think it would be a very, very sad day for the town of Carmel. I'm going to introduce Karen Labuto now, who is going to discuss briefly the issue of the text amendment.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks, Karen.
Good
Hi,
evening.
Karen.
My name's Karen Labruto. I'm a senior planner with the Chazen Companies. I'm going to walk you through the presentation I just handed out.
Karen, I just ask you to speak loud, not necessarily for us, but it's being recorded for the folks watching from TV.
Sure. As described by Bill, the applicants seek a text amendment to allow for the continued activities of the long-cherished clubhouse amenities as well as some golf functions, and so that they can do a partial redevelopment of the property with residential development. The zoning text amendment was developed with the cluster provisions in mind and other aspects of the zoning regulations that considered larger size developments. We welcome your comments on how to improve the draft. So the property is approximately 187 acres, comprised of 3 tax parcels. You know, it's on Fair Street and John Simpson. As we mentioned, the zoning text amendment is for existing golf courses only. It would allow for residential redevelopment if you could meet the minimum lot area of 20 acres for residential. We suggest that there be a max density of 6 dwelling units per acre with a total maximum of 100 dwelling units. And this would be calculated similar to how cluster is calculated. You subtract out the environmentally constrained land or wetlands, utilities, roads. And on page 5, we have a good demonstration of that calculation. So if you've got 40 acres, you take out the environmentally constrained area, brings you down to 28. You take out for roads, brings you down to 25.2. Multiply that by 6, you get 151. But as we stated, the text amendment says that there's a maximum allowed of 100. And at the bottom here, we say 96 dwelling units, and that refers to the concept that Larry will be going over with you. So getting it back to what's allowed in the residential development, we would allow or suggest that be allowed semi-detached dwellings, 2-family, single-family, and we've introduced a new use, a new residential use, the attached dwelling, which would be row houses with no more than 4 in a row. Starting on page 6, we talk about bulk and dimensional requirements. So we're looking at 2.5 stories or a 40-foot high max, lot coverage at 35%, a minimum setback of 30 feet off a public road. The recreation requirement is 50 square feet per dwelling unit. And on page 7, we have a comparison of the cluster and the zoning text amendment for the site. And the takeaway here is that, yes, we're introducing greater density, but as Bill discussed, we're also introducing deed-restricted land. So the ratio is 1-to-1. So for the residential developed area in total, if you have a 40-acre parcel for that, then it's 40 acres of deed-restricted residential area. So, I mean, I can get into a little bit more of the specifics on the zoning text amendment, but essentially, when it comes to bulk and dimensional, it's 35% lot coverage, the 40-foot or 2.5 story maximum height. The other remaining elements are, much of it is at planning board discretion as we've written it. It's 2 spaces per dwelling unit except for single family, which was 1 space, with 15% for required visitor parking. I know there were comments related to that, and like I said at the beginning, we're open to suggestions. This was a draft, you know, we submitted it a long time back now, and you know, we just want to get the conversation started. And Larry's going to go through the concept plan of, you know, what a potential development on the site could look like, and then we could open up to questions if that's helpful.
Thank you.
Is that over me? Open.
Thank you very much, Karen. My name is Larry Boudreau with Chase & Companies. I am a landscape architect. Actually designed Centennial Golf with Peter and Larry Nelson back in the day. That was a fun time. Thank you very much. I'll cherish it for forever. We were before you last fall, and I'm starting on slide number 10. And slide number 10 shows a context layout of 96 units. They're an orange color and kind of a, a lighter green color. This was presented last fall. This plan wanted to show you the area that we're looking at, 187 acres. The project comprises 40 acres. The reason for the two colors, the orange, again on slide 10, is in the Carmel School District, and the other color is in the Brewster School District. So the school district line actually jogs off of the town line there and back into the site. Flipping to the next page is zoomed in. Again, this was presented in presentation boards last September. The key here is that Carmel has water and sewer, Southeast doesn't. And the idea is to move the current parking lot that's out there right now supporting the facility across the town line, so that opens up the development opportunity that's shown here. So clubhouse is in the middle. The access remains the same for both the clubhouse, the golf, and the project. So there'll be a shared access for the project and the golf facility. So flipping that over on 11 here. Yeah, what this shows is how that text amendment would work on this parcel. So the idea here is that we're showing a 40-acre parcel. That's what it would comprise of. And the townhouses there, which are toll typical, not typical, but specific for this project, located. And again, there's 96 homes shown there. Again, the yellow is 40 acres. As Karen said, what we had to then do is take that environmental sensitive area out, which is the wetland area, subtract that out, subtract the roads out, and determine a density. And again, as that chart showed, the max density couldn't exceed 100, and we're showing 96 here. As part of the code, when you flip it, on slide 12, what we wanted to show is the 1-to-1 ratio of deed restricted open space. That's up top. That red represents the 40 acres of deed restricted land adjacent to the Kelly Ridge. When you flip to the next page, on 13, you'll see that it extends all the way over to the north. So we entirely cover all the homes along the Kelly Ridge. So we extend the proposed deed restricted open space beyond 40 and to 52.5. The breakdown of the whole site, so again, we have 187 acres for the land that sits within Carmel, 52.5 of that, which makes up 28% of the parcel, is deed restricted. The remaining golf that's in Carmel and the vegetative and wetland areas total about 95 acres. That's 50.6 acres together between the golf and the deed restricted area. We're taking almost 80% of the land in Carmel and either deed restricting it or making it open space. 80%, a little less than 150 acres. And then, of course, the parcel is 40 acres. Toll is here tonight, and that's their presentation that they gave me. They wanted me to hand it out, showing the elevations of the unit mix and floor plans, floor layouts, and interior finishes, and will be available for any questions that you might have. Thank you very much.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm having trouble between the various slides visualizing the location of the development versus the golf course versus the land that would be deed restricted.
Okay. All right, so if you go to slide 2. Slide 2 shows the 187.4 acres and 3 parcels. The development is, I guess, can I come point it to you?
Sure.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll hold it up so everybody can see.
Yeah, I mean, I should have done that, but it's a parking lot,
Yep.
and it's the driveway. So it's here and here.
That is the development.
Yep, there and there.
And the golf course?
Yeah, all here, here.
Here and here.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is the deed restricted?
Yeah, this is the deed restricted.
Okay.
Just so you know, in the future, we could set you up with the TV here, and you could have had this presentation on
Yeah,
there.
I
Just so you
called,
know.
but had to call earlier, so I was a bit late.
Yeah. So
But next time I'll-
if and when you come back, right, that's available for you to use. We can hook it up with a computer, so.
So, any questions?
So let me ask the board here, board members, if they have any questions. Bob, got to just speak into the microphone.
Sure. So, and this is a follow-on to my earlier question. I'm hearing and sympathetic to the economic plight that Mr. Schilling described, but what happens to the golf course if there's a further economic slide? After this hypothetically would be approved?
The part of the Carmel, part of the golf course in Carmel is subject to deed restriction. The document which deed restricts, I'm sure, would provide for that eventuality. In other words, it's deed restricted from commercial and residential development. There is a document that would be filed that the owner of the golf course would sign, forever barring it from commercial or residential development. But the document would also provide for the event if the golf course went under. For example, I've been privy to, in that circumstance, to let the municipality come in and continue the golf course or something like that. The answer to your question is that it would be brought out as a contingency in the deed restriction covenant.
So let me just try for people trying to listen on TV also. Let me try to play this back, Bob and Bill, and correct me if I'm wrong. So if we proceed this route and the question is the golf course goes out of business 5, 10, 15 years from now, what happens to that golf course space? And you're saying it would remain as green space and not be able to be developed as commercial or residential property?
It would be an agreement that would be framed by my clients as a deed restriction and the town. And the eventuality of the remaining part of the golf course going under would be covered in that, so that the town's sentiment or desires could be incorporated into it. However, the prohibition to commercial development or residential development would be in perpetuity.
Well, but what happens, I'm sorry, Bob, go ahead,
Yeah,
please.
I guess I'm not following something because where in the amendments that you're proposing, is there a deed restriction on the golfing property versus the property that you're putting in as open space?
There's 150 acres total of what would be open space. 55 of it is, or 50 of it is created by the deed restriction, which my client would execute as part of this. That deed restriction would include the, would have as a party to the agreement a member of the town or the town council that would provide for whatever it is the town would like in the event that the golf course went under. But in my opinion, it couldn't involve construction, either residential or commercial.
Bob, I think what you're getting at is it's not in the zoning. That's a
my point.
sidebar agreement that would accompany the zoning.
That's my point.
Thank you.
Bill, the total property size is 187 acres, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. How many acres would be the subject of this?
The cluster.
No, not the cluster.
No, I know, but I'll give it to you as best I can explain it. Part of the open space is made possible by virtue of the cluster subdivision. And how many acres is that?
Deed restricted open space is 52.5.
52.5.
Yep.
Okay.
And that covers all the property adjoining the properties along Kelly Ridge.
Okay. So, and Kelly Ridge is how many, or the proposed area for building is 20 acres?
40.
40 acres. So that's 92.5 acres.
Exactly.
So
And
what
then,
happens to
and
the
then the
other
remaining would be 94.9.
And what about the 94.9?
The 94.9 is currently Lakes 7 and 9, Fairways 1 and 9, and the clubhouse, vegetated areas outside of the golf course, and wetlands.
But there would be no deed restriction on that.
No deed restriction, but the idea that we're getting here is that remains open space. So I guess we have to answer the question.
Yeah.
Why isn't it in the amendment that you're proposing?
Initially, we were talking 150 acres of open space. That's how
Right.
it was presented to us.
Right.
Now I'm hearing it's not 150 acres.
What I'm hearing is that it's 90-something acres of open space and development, and 90 acres that you're going to do golfing at, and some separate sidebar agreement as to development of that
Right,
latter
so-
property. And I'm asking the question, why can't this all be in the
Right.
amendment?
In the event that the golf course ceases to be open.
Correct.
Right,
Because this is an amendment about golf courses, right?
right.
Hi, everybody. Frank J. Smith III, Associate Attorney of William Schilling, on behalf of the applicants. I did just want to mention, as it relates to the deed restriction that you're talking about, of the parcel that's not included in the text amendment. So the text amendment provides the 1-to-1 ratio, where however many acres you use for the cluster, you also need to have deed restricted as open space. So in this instance, we would have to provide 40, but we're providing the 52.5. Now, the question is about the remaining 90-some-odd acres. And I did want to make a point to what Pat had said at the earlier aspect of the meeting as it relates to conditional zoning. Conditional zoning would permit the town board to make a number of condition recommendations in order to approve the project. So that very well may be something that the town board is interested in discussing with the applicant when we get back to that stage. But as it stands, the text amendment itself provides for a mandatory 1-to-1 ratio of the area that's being used for development to also be retained as open space. So that 52.5 acres would be deed restricted per the text amendment code. And then the remaining acreage, for right now, I believe there's 4 holes that are left on it that would be part of the remaining 18-hole golf course. That's also where the clubhouse is, that's also where the wetlands are. And if the town board would like to make conditions upon the approval, that's where the conditional zoning aspect comes in.
Got it.
So, Pat, One of the things we got to keep in mind is a town master plan currently underway, right? And one of the things the town revitalization is looking at is opportunities, more opportunities, as you know, as everyone knows that lives in the town of Carmel, right? Is we're looking for more commercial use and more mixed use. This is too much of a burden put on homeowners, take from a tax point of view. What I'm hearing today, correct me if I'm wrong, what I'm hearing today would not help that in any way then.
This is a residential development, that's correct.
And if, hopefully not, if the golf course would go out of business someday, the entire golf course, and what I heard today, it would still have to remain residential, we might want that at that time, 10 years from now, to be something else in residential. It might want to be mixed use or commercial. Now, I don't, or open space, right. So I'm not sure we want to lock ourselves into anything like that, because that's one of the nicest pieces of property in the town of Carmel.
It is.
Close to highways too, by the way. And we have this whole effort underway on commercial mixed use. So it's just, did I summarize that correctly?
You did. Yeah.
So I would just remind the board that our code, and Mr. Schilling set this forth earlier, and he was 100% correct. 15676 sets forth the blueprint, if you will, for a change in zoning. So the referral came from the town board. In the event, and I'll read directly from the code, in recommending the adoption of any proposed amendment, the planning board shall fully state its reason for such recommendation, describing any change in conditions justifying the amendment and the manner in which the amendment would be in harmony with a town master plan. So that is definitively something in our code that you are to consider when considering any zoning change, text amendment or otherwise.
If I could, the part of the statute that Joe just read, I think, is compelling. The conditions that are to be imposed to keep the golf course and all the things in place are really to be the suggestions or the impetus of the boards, not of the applicants. So if there's a concern, for example, that the golf course goes under, and that's 50 acres, you might not necessarily want it to be deed restricted. You could suggest in your recommendation, you don't want to forever bar that from development, but you could put a certain provision in there that would allow the town to control the future development. So that's why we're here, to hear the concerns you have, and then you would make the recommendations based on what you believe would be the best direction for this project to move forward.
Okay. So, go ahead.
One of my concerns, well, several of my concerns, it's not just the density that we're talking about here. I mean, I'm looking at the zoning bulk regulations, page 7, and in just about every aspect, permitted height, you're asking, the code is 35, you're asking 40. Setbacks, front, you're asking. So in other words, it's not just the density, 6 dwelling units per acre. You're asking us to go against the plan, a town master plan, in many respects.
Well, we're creating a new text amendment.
Right.
Which, because of what it offers the town, the continuation of the course and what have you, that there's sort of a quid pro quo that the town agrees to some flexibility with regard to the density requirements in exchange for the deed restriction, in exchange for the continuation of what is there, as opposed to what would be a development that I think would be in everybody's worst interest.
I'm not so sure I agree with you 100%, but
Okay.
Can I bring up a question?
Please, into the microphone.
So one of the things I
Bob,
did,
speak into the microphone, please.
one of the things I looked at was a comparison of the wording of the existing residential cluster development in the code versus what you're proposing. And one question I had is, I'm focusing on paragraph V6.
Say that, B6?
B6, yes. Residential development may be comprised of dwelling attached, dwelling semi-detached, dwelling single-family, or dwelling two-family units.
Yes.
When I look at the existing provision in residential cluster development, it's much simpler. It says dwelling units in detached, semi-detached, attached, and groups of attached. And then later on, it says, a couple paragraphs later, it says, talks about a total number of dwelling units. So I'm wondering why the complicated wording here versus what seems to be a more simple formula in the existing cluster.
Yeah, it was not, it was not meant to be intentionally complicated at all. It was really simply to just state what residential uses we were proposing, and we were just trying to make sure we captured everything that we had in mind, and so we added the new definition for attached dwelling. But, I mean, I'd be happy to review that and see if we can uncomplicate it.
I was concerned as to whether it was adding flexibility that I was not realizing or not seeing in the existing cluster development wording.
It's difficult for me to assess what you're saying without having what you're looking at right in front of me.
Okay.
I'd like to follow up, but I can't read it right now. So maybe you could pass it over to me and I can take a look for a minute.
Sure.
So one of the procedural issues that we ran into the first time this applicant was before us with respect to the zoning amendment was the planning board's reluctance to write this legislation themselves. We're receiving a document from an applicant, we're asking to comment on it, we're not rewriting it. So to the extent that the board likes the document itself and would request certain modifications, I'm sure the applicant will receive those and make modifications and submit it back to the board for its overall consideration. But I think what the board was very reluctant in doing would be to receive a submission from the applicant and then try to do its own wordsmithing, trying to integrate it back into our code. So just a thought.
Yeah, I'm not advocating changing. I just wanted to understand why the difference.
No, but in your little issue becomes a bigger concern for the board.
Yep.
No. Thank you, Joe. So
Sorry, I can respond to your comment. So the reason it was written this way, dwelling, comma, attached, semi-detached dwelling, was to make it clearer for you all to look back on the definitions and how those terms are defined exactly. So I think I was just trying to make it very clear that we were using defined terms in the zoning resolution, and we were adding another one, and we named it similarly to those. It was not, there was no other intention there beyond that.
So I assume the answer to this is economics, but I want to ask it anyway. So why doesn't this proposal come forward with what already is approved by our code, which is the cluster per our code or the 3-acre zoning? Neither of those work, I assume, because of economics?
I think part of it is the added density that we were seeking. Part of it is the flexibility in design that speaks to, Toll's vision for the site and, what the beautiful site could have on it. I think, yeah, we're speaking to a very specific case in some ways that, there's a purpose and need here that's been well established here tonight by Bill, and the zoning text amendment helps to enact, the maintenance of these cherished amenities, through time. Potentially that could require conditions of the site plan approval. It provides deed-restricted space, deed-restricted open space at a 1-to-1 ratio, again, could be augmented as a condition on the site plan. And, in general, tries to provide those amenities that the town has loved while, making an economic benefit that can sustain them.
Okay, thanks. So Pat, what are our options here? Positive or negative or no comment back to the town board?
That's exactly right. So the challenge you have is that your guidance, as Joe pointed out, is that something like this must be consistent with a comprehensive plan. So the comprehensive plan that's in place today was designed for the upzoning. So this is completely contrary to the existing master plan. The update that's occurring now, yet to be determined. We haven't seen the outcome of that. So they're between a rock and a hard place. They're stuck with an inconsistent approach to zoning based on the old master plan and an unknown approach to zoning with the future master plan. So this petition has to stand on its own merits. So it is this team's burden to satisfy your concerns, comments. If there's additional analysis that's necessary, if there's additional support that's necessary, they are obligated to give it to you because we don't have a resource to say, yes, it's consistent, or no, it's not consistent. So it's their burden in this case. So any additional information, any additional studies, anything else you'd require to help you make a judgment, they have to give that to you. And yes, your response is a positive recommendation, a negative recommendation, nothing. You cannot communicate at all to the town board. You can simply say, it's up to you guys. The benefit from your response would be some constructive criticism to the town board in some way or another. It doesn't have to be a universal thumbs up or thumbs down. It can be, we like certain aspects of it. These are the things that need to be refined. You can communicate to them in whatever way you find necessary. This is simply your advice to the decision-making body.
That was helpful, thanks.
I just have a question, I guess, for whoever, Bill maybe. So in paragraph 1, it goes on, it says ultimately for the greater good of the town. So what is the greater good of the town that this is serving? Yeah.
Well, first of all, in answer, Craig, to your question, clearly the reason we think we deserve greater density is because we're willing to deed restrict our property, which is an incredible value that's been lost by my client. And the fact that we're clustering adds even more open space. So the reason we think that we should benefit is because we're giving something that's has a value that is clear. To deed restrict and to take away a viable large chunk of property by virtue of the remaining Carmel golf course in Carmel, and the cluster development where the green space is there as a result of the cluster. We're doing something we think that inures to the benefit of the town. Economically, we're giving something great, and for that reason, we're looking for the benefit of some easing up on restrictions. As to your question, Mr. Cote, I think the benefit to the town is this. The golf course and all of the things on the site are incredible importance to people in the hamlet and people in the town. And the 1,000-pound gorilla in the room is that this entity is not making money, and that you just look around where something like this has happened elsewhere, it becomes a conventional, money-making, single lot, as-of-right subdivision. So the answer is, we feel as though we're giving a great deal to the town. We feel as though we've given a great deal to the town on the existing amenities that exist there, the golf course and the restaurant and what have you. And so we're asking for relaxing of the standards because we think it's in the best interest of the town, and we believe the quid pro quo would be the relaxing of standards because of the donation or because of the restriction that we've given to the town. And one more thing, I have to remind you that 15676 says that you're directed to try, I understand it's beautiful property, you may want to develop it, but it also says under the Greenway Pact that you're to go out and seek additional green space, open space, and this is consistent with that directive that you get from your statute.
With all due respect, Bill, you know, if you were going to develop that whole huge parcel, that infrastructure would be massive. And, you know, Toll Brothers wouldn't be here looking
Well,
at this piece either.
We've done, my client has done marketing, and notwithstanding the point you made, they find it economically the best, their best alternative, at least presently.
Is the cluster.
No, conventional if they're turned down here.
Really?
Bill, with regard to the 40 acres that you're going to deed restrict, what portion is that?
I think it's, the total is 150, the 50 is, and it's not 50 and 150, but it's close to that.
Let me put it this way.
Yeah.
The deed restricted parcel.
Yeah.
What portion of that is wetlands or non-development?
What we're deed restricting, 0.
So the area you're going to deed restrict is 100%?
There's just one area,
52.5 beautiful
if you're
acres.
familiar with the golf course, it's up on the top, there's a small pond. That's the only area that was man-made. Other than that, it's all upland, easy slopes to develop. Almost entirely the 52.5 acres, except for that one area. I could point it out on the map if you like. Yeah, Michelle.
And additionally, just to bolster that point, the text amendment provides for the 1-to-1 ratio, like we discussed, which would be the 40 acres, based upon the 40 acres of building the cluster. The reason why it's 52.5 is so that the deed restricted portion can run the entire length of the Kelly Ridge neighborhood. If there wasn't that extra 12.5 acres, a portion of that neighborhood would be up against property that could be developed later on. So the additional 12.5 acres ensures that there's a significant buffer between Kelly Ridge and then where the development is taking place.
Can I ask Joe a question? Can I ask Joe a question? Joe, do you want to comment on the argument that we're compelled to seek open green
Greg,
space?
you've got multiple meetings going on.
And how that balances against the lack of...
Too many sidebars here. Let's, Bob, you got a question for Joe?
Yeah.
So if I understand the question, it was requesting my comment as to Mr. Schilling's assertion that we're compelled to consider open space under the Greenway provisions. Is that accurate?
And how that relates to the fact that this is in contravention of the existing comprehensive plan.
That's the balancing act that you're being asked to perform. There are, Mr. Schilling has set forth a number of provisions in our existing zoning code that this text amendment would be consistent with and would foster those goals. I've also read to you the criteria that this has to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. So you're forced to deal with that in the context of the existing comprehensive plan, knowing that we have a comprehensive plan committee meeting ongoing for several months. So, you know, you're always looking to perform a balancing test that is consistent with our code, but you also heard testimony tonight relative to the fact that the density would be significantly different than what would otherwise be permissible. So those are the comparisons and contrasts that you're going to have to consider. So, Mr. Chairman, if I could, again, I just want to refer you back to our code in terms of what it is that you're being asked to do this evening. You can make a recommendation, and you can make a recommendation recommending the adoption of the proposed amendment, and you should set forth the reasons for that recommendation of adoption, or you can make a recommendation of rejecting the proposal, and likewise should set forth the reasons for why you would be rejecting it. And then that would be referred on to the town board for their further consideration.
But Joe, I can also make a recommendation as none, not positive, not negative, because of these current concerns, current master plan underway, don't want to be locked into future commercial development or mixed use, right? I mean, I don't have to say positive or negative. Is that correct?
That's correct, but I would create a record with respect to why you are essentially standing mute with respect to the proposed text amendment, so that the town board has something to consider when it ultimately makes its decision.
Yes. I mean, I don't, yeah, I agree with you. I don't want, because just because you have positive and negative, there's still issues that need to be resolved here. There's a lot of discussion items that the town board then, I mean, I want to help the town board here. We can pass on a lot of this information in a positive way to the town board. At the end of the day, it's their decision. Correct?
Yeah, you're being asked for your recommendation, your input.
Okay. Any other questions from the board members?
Mr. Schilling, you mentioned earlier, with regard to the 94.9 acres, the golf course, right?
Yes.
The 18 holes. You would be willing to put some language in there that would be comfortable with the town and the town board as far as control of future development of that, should the golf course
Yes.
not be able to move forward?
I'll speak for my client, but I'm sure that if the town wanted to put its thumbprint on the agreement in that eventuality, yes, I'm sure that they would be agreeable to that. And as we conclude, if I could just make one other inquiry, if the board feels as though they've provided us some things that perhaps we could, for example, some changes to the text amendment regarding the road that the golf course must be on, things like that, we would be happy to resubmit and seek your favorable approval if you think that would be something that you would like to see.
Mr. Chairman, that's a fundamental change to the text amendment. There's no question about it. That allows other properties to be eligible. That's a significant modification.
Yeah, yeah.
Other golf courses.
Golf
But
courses.
it's still golf courses, which limits it to the 3 golf courses.
It may only be limited to 2 golf courses, because Putnam National is deed restricted due to east of Hudson watershed and New York City DEP. So they're never going to be able to build on that. The reason why there are no houses there now is because the county took funds from the east of Hudson watershed and created that golf course as that open space. So that can never be built.
But the change from one to more than one is a fundamental change.
But we ought to consider whether a change from one to more than one is a good thing or a bad thing.
That's exactly right.
No, we have to, I'll repeat, we have to consider whether a change from one to more than one is a good thing or a bad thing? A good thing or a bad thing?
So, does anyone on the board want to make a recommendation, positive, negative, or neither, right now?
Does this have to be done tonight, or should we put a list of concerns each person has together?
So we have, there is a time frame to provide them for all that, or I'm sure the applicant would consent to extend that if we have deliberations. Yes.
Yeah, there is a statutory timeframe that we're working under. The planning board has essentially 45 days. Obviously, there's been a tolling of that period of time under the governor's executive orders and the pandemic. And there's also been consensual tolling of time. If there's going to be a new submission with a change in language, then the applicant should ask to do that. And then the planning board would, in all likelihood, consent to that. However, you do have a time frame in which you have to act, and if you wish to deliberate further, consent to the applicant will be necessary in order to do that.
Joe, I'm just not sure that, you know, we have the current, this is very contrary to the current master plan. We have a master plan currently underway that's actually meeting once a month with the consultants that they've hired to do this, a professional redevelopment firm, if you will. I'm not sure that Bill and the team, whatever they resubmit, would change that, because the master plan is currently underway.
I can't refute anything that you said.
I was
there.
just addressing the yeah.
I would tend to agree with you, Mr. Chairman. I think that in the context of the master plan...
Bob, speaking, I'm sorry.
I think in the context of the master plan being considered, personally, I'm feeling...
Bob, we can't hear you.
Personally, I'm feeling fairly reluctant in jumping the gun and forcing them or attempting to force them into a position that they may not be ready to take. My preference would be that third course.
I'm sorry?
My preference would be that third course, which is not a yes, not a no, but explaining our concerns to the town board.
So how far off is this master plan?
What do you think? I hate to, I mean,
Well, it's
over a year.
government, so
I don't know.
can't be
It's
that
hard
quick.
to tell. I think it's targeted for next year, Rich. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, it should be in play probably no later than this time next year, so about a year from now. Or at least a very good version of it by then.
Now, keep in mind, we're just making a recommendation to the town board. At the end of the day, it's going to be the town board's decision, but regardless of what motion comes to being tonight, we should provide the town a lot of our valuable information that we've discussed here for the last 2 hours to help them. I don't want to put the monkey on their back necessarily. I want to help them make an informed decision, because they have their own opinions on this, obviously, right? So I want to at least, as you can see, I've been taking a lot of notes, summarizing notes to the town board, regardless of what positive, negative, or no recommendation someone on the board is going to propose.
I guess if I could chime in. As much as Mr. Schilling artfully tries to convince us that this is about the greater good of the town, I'm not personally, and I'm not speaking for the board, I'm speaking personally, I'm not convinced. You know, I think, quite honestly, this is really about the applicant and the applicant's financial issues, and I have a heart and I understand. But as a planning board, our goal is to look at the totality of the Carmel and to try to develop it smartly in line with the plan that we have, the master plan. And I just don't see the true benefit to the town to giving up so much as far as density and you know, the other things I raised earlier. And as much as you try to say that it's not spot zoning, because 2 other golf courses might be, well, Rich pointed out that 1 golf course is not, it's not applicable. And you haven't really convinced me that the other golf course, it would work.
It's not spot zoning because of the benefit derived by the town, not necessarily because it applies in practice to 1 or 2.
But that's the definition of spot zoning, isn't it?
Spot zoning is where you give preferential treatment to a taxpayer or to a landowner without equal return. My statement to you, Mr. Code, is that you're getting equal return. A golf course in Amenia went this exact path and gave the golf course gave density out in exchange for the continuation of the golf course. And it's prevalent. And my suggestion to you is that this is a time, the board is still open for business. The master plan, you think it's a year away. I suggest it might be more than 2 years away. This is a part of zone change, which is part of your code. And so is the Greenway Pact. So it's great to normalize and look for direction from a master plan or from a master plan to be, but you have to be creative in these circumstances. You have to zone change where the dynamics require you to do it. And in this case, I think you're required because throughout the state, financial hardship is being felt by golf courses and you're losing them. And in exchange for the non-losing of the golf course, they're giving density. And your Greenway Pact says we should look for green space. That's a priority. That's a directive that your statute gives to you. One other statement. We've heard comments from the board that I would like to think and I would like to have you consider to show that, you know, we're closer to your approval than perhaps we are right now. And so while, Mr. Frankel, you might not agree that you'll go to positive, I think it would be something that we would request, because I've heard 3 or 4 things about a deed restriction subject to a town approval. I think that that's a very creative idea, part of a zone change criteria that I think we'd like to implement. So I understand, you know, the round hole and the round peg. I get that. It doesn't always work that way, though, and we're not there now. There's no master plan that we can wait for, and the master plan in existence is known by everyone to be terribly, terribly deficient. The schools are in decline. There's a shortage of housing. I mean, you don't have to have a new master plan to know that with the Greenway Pact for the open space, for the schools in decline, for beautiful housing in an area that's in need, I don't think you're going to find anything that's going to be the square peg in the square hole, but it's pretty close. I think this is definitely within the town of Carmel's best interest, with the continuation of all those things and with solid cluster development, which is what you want. I'd like to resubmit and put a couple more things in for you to consider before you make your recommendation to the town board. I ask you respectfully. If that's not what you want, I understand, but I have heard 3 or 4 things that I think all of you have mentioned that we could incorporate as your thumbprint into what goes up to the town board.
I would like to say something to address something you mentioned, Mr. Schilling. You talk about the schools in decline. I think at a previous meeting, we had determined that this was going to be developed as a condominium.
Not a condominium, townhomes.
These will not be condominiums?
No.
So these will be deeded properties?
Yes.
Taxed at full rate without any discount?
Yes.
Well, they're attached, right?
No, it's a condominium structure, correct.
It is a condominium
Yes.
structure. So my point is, if this is going to contribute to the student body at schools, it's not going to be carrying its own weight in terms of property taxes compared to other developments, other properties, single-family homes in town. And that's a concern that I have.
Yeah, that economic analysis that we did and presented in September was at the full rate. We looked at it briefly under a condominium structure. It's still a net positive. It doesn't go negative. And we can provide that to you. Yes.
Well, if you're looking for the board to be flexible on some things, well, what about the flexibility with the density? If that could be reduced somewhat so it doesn't set such a huge precedent.
Yes, on the density, what's interesting about that is at 6 units an acre comes to 151. And the minimum is 100. That density could go to 4 and be 100, and we're developing 96. If that's something the board would, favor, we could look at that.
I know I said to Bill, when you're going to develop in a cluster, it's a much more developer-friendly situation as opposed to developing over 197 acres.
Sure.
So, there is definitely a benefit to the developer for doing a cluster as opposed to developing 197
Correct,
acres.
and to the town for open space.
Yeah, but the density, I think what their concern is that if Mayapack decides that they're struggling, they could probably tie into the sewer on Route 6 and water, and they're saying, well, if we have another cluster here, the density could be just as great.
Right, so my question is, the environmental area, when I take that out of the overall land, it's my understanding that that's just the wetland area.
And steep slopes, if there are steep slopes, you said there might be steep slopes.
Are there steep slopes in there?
You said there might have been, so you
No,
said
no,
the
no,
area
no,
of
no,
steep
no,
slopes is an
I'm
area.
saying in the code is.
Environmental constrained land.
Yeah, so what's that?
Steep slopes and wetlands typically. And-
Does it give me?
That's by state code. It might
Does
not
it
be
give
in
me, does it define steep slopes?
It doesn't. So if there's a habitat restriction that's identified by DEC, it's an identified environmental constraint.
And the state has what steep slopes are and what you can or cannot develop on, right?
All right, what about wetland buffers?
Within 100 feet, right? That's a state-regulated wetland, so.
Right.
Right, all regulated areas, basically, Larry.
Right, so you're
Right,
losing
so
your
that's why
wetland,
it's
you're
at
losing the 100-foot
6.
buffer.
Because the density number, I asked Mike if I have to include the buffers, he said no, just the wetlands.
Okay.
So if I have to include the buffers, then the 6 gets us to 100. If I don't include the buffers, then 4 gets us to 100. I just need to understand how to.
I don't understand how 6 gets you there or 4 gets you there. How does this, what different numbers get you to 100 either way? You might want to explain that a little further.
Oh, no, it's very simple because one way I'm taking the buffer as an environmentally constrained area and the other way I'm not.
I got that. So how do you get 100 either way? You would think that if you had 2 different numbers you were dividing and or multiplying by, you would get a different number out of 100.
What I need to know is exactly how I define the environmental constraint, because it's not in the code, right?
We can provide that for you, Larry.
Okay, if you can provide that, then
Yes.
I can, get that number more accurate. Because right now, it only includes the wetland area.
Right, but per state code, wouldn't it include a steep slopes, any lakes or ponds, and that buffer area?
Yep, I have the lakes or the ponds, but I
So
don't have the buffer.
we'll get together and
Okay.
we'll provide you with an accurate.
And if you can,
Right, but if you
Get-
take that number out, so you take those acreages out, even take away the buffer, you have 187 acres. What do you take out when you take out wetlands? How big is that wetland?
All right, give me a second.
I mean, work can be done in a buffer? I don't know, you have to get state permission within that? It's
Yeah.
50 feet, 100 feet, you gotta be, So, in the town, it's 100 feet, state gets you to 100.
All right,
want you to look
so
at 50, 500,
to answer your
whatever.
question, the environmentally constrained area is 12 acres. That 12 acres is entirely wetlands,
So 180, what's that? Not buffer.
no buffer.
So some buffer has to be in there, because the state's not gonna let you build
I
up
just
to
need
it.
to know if I have to add buffer into it, then that makes it probably 16 or 17 acres of environmentally constrained area.
And then steep slopes per state code.
Right, now the steep slopes would only be within the 40 acres, right? It's not, it's only in the development parcel, so that's
That's
fine.
correct.
I can add that in there.
Right, no, so I think Mark's question, so this started with Mark's question of taking the entire 187 acres, figuring out what's constrained. What's constrained is wetlands, buffer, steep slopes, lakes, ponds. What's that total area? So now 187 is not just taking away 16, it's not 170, it might be 140.
Right.
It might be 150, I don't know what that number is.
Right, but here's the difference. We're looking at the 40 acres of the parcel, of the new development
No,
parcel.
But Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, your question was, if you went in a conventional subdivision,
Right,
3 acre zoning,
absolutely.
right? You're gonna take away
You
wetlands.
are.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
Understood.
when Bill said, well, I don't want to put a gun to your head, but this is what could happen.
How many units
That's
is
more of
that?
a developer's nightmare than this scenario, and I'm not saying I'm against this, but if you guys are trying to push this thing along quicker, then maybe there's going to be some give and take on the density.
So, what were you saying, Anthony, it's 50 homes?
I'm saying if you take away whatever we agree to be that, and you're gonna build on 3 acre zoning, you may be 55 homes, 50.
So you're doubling the 55 homes, so Mark was going back, is it that 96 negotiable? Go ahead, this isn't what he said, and this isn't what I mean, but go ahead, do it on 3 acre zoning, see what happens, you only get 52, right? But that's not what I'm not putting a gun to your head to say that, I'm not telling you to go do that. But 51, 55 is the number you can get, you're asking for 96. Mark said, is there room for negotiation? That's all the question, I believe that was being asked.
Okay, Pat, you'll get me the definition? So what I'll do is I'll run the calc based on that definition. It'll be very clear, everybody will see it.
Yep.
And
And
we'll-
Larry, that will require Mike's input, so he's on vacation at the
Yep,
moment, so it's
okay.
not going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm not saying I'm against this thing right
Yeah,
now, I'm just
yeah.
curious as to see
Sure.
where there's some give and take.
So, could I just jump in here? Are we at the point where the applicant is asking to submit additional information, either an amendment or additional information with respect to the proposed text amendment for the board's continued consideration? Because
Yeah.
I'm not sure when our next meeting is, but obviously we would put you on our next meeting.
Yeah, I think that's what I heard Bill said before, that he'd be willing to supply more data. I think as a courtesy, we should at least allow that. And again, just for everyone's sake, this goes back to, whether it's positive, negative, or neutral, this does go back to the town board for their ultimate decision. With our regardless if we rule positive or negative or no decision, and personally, I think Joe mentioned this earlier, I'm more in favor of making a positive, negative recommendation, not being wishy-washy personally. I'd rather give them something firm to go with. But regardless of what we give them, it will have why we said what. But I want to at least listen to, give you another time to bring more information into us. I think that's the right
Okay.
thing to do.
Okay. Do we know when your next meeting is, or we
Yes,
don't?
the 29th. There's a fifth Wednesday this particular month.
So it's
and
July 29th?
That's what the supervisor
Yeah, I
had
think it's
indicated.
July 29th, and I think there's only one meeting in August like we typically do.
When is the submittal date?
8 o'clock this morning. You missed it.
What?
What is it, normally a week before? I thought- yeah.
It's an ongoing application. You get into it.
Yeah, soon.
Okay, all right, very good. Okay, and you'll get me that info. Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for all the hard work. Bill, thank you. Have-
I like the feeling when I was sitting home doing it.
You don't have that luxury right now. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Good evening, everybody.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to adjourn? No minutes.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Rich, I had the 29th master plan.
There's a master plan meeting in my calendar.